April 2024. We have one apology. Lyle is out of town but going to join us remotely and plans to do so at 2:15. He is therefore technically an apology for lateness. Do we have any leaves of absence?
5 April to 23.
Barry?
22 April to 26 inclusive.
Thank you.
23rd of April.
8th of May and 25th of September.
Well, done well again. Right. Okay. Any further leaves of absence? No. Okay. I move that the apology for lateness for Councillor Cox be accepted and the requests for leave of absence be approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Matt. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Declarations of conflict of interest.
Item 5, I was a past employee of Red Light Park and I'm an operator on the same street. So
Okay, it's.
might be good for me to abstain from that vote.
Oh, I'm pretty comfortable. So it's up to you, obviously. If you want to move away, you can.
Thank you.
Okay. No resolution required. No matters lying on the table. Special announcements. I've just got one to make. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly recognise the great achievement of Dr. Jim Salinger, who was recently awarded Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year. I'm sure many of us will be aware of the significant work Jim does in the climate science space, notably being recognised as one of the first scientists to address global warming in the 1970s. We're very lucky to have Jim as a member of our climate reference group, where his passion and knowledge are incredibly valuable. And as this award is certainly well deserved, on behalf of our community, I would like to say congratulations and thank you. Well done, Jim.
Well done.
Public forum, Pierre.
February was the warmest February ever. It was the 9th consecutive month to break temperature records with 4 days in a row above 2 degrees. The last 12 months were 1.56 degrees above pre-industrial average, and March was trending in the same direction. The world's oceans have also reached an all-time high temperature. If you struggle to keep up with these numbers, what it all means is that we are in a really bad situation. Today, though, we're going to cover some good news, some really good news, and some bad news, all relating directly to the district. The good news is that the climate action website from the council is up and running. It is a sleek website that gives access to a wealth of information. We like that it states that decarbonization will require a collective effort and that it links to useful resources and to amazing local organizations. The really good news is the recent release of the landmark electric homes report from Rewiring Aotearoa. We know of data proving that to electrify everything is not only one of the most impactful low-hanging fruits of climate action, it is also the cheapest way to go for New Zealand households. To boycott fossil fuels and to electrify everything does not only participate to improve the outcome for life on this planet, it also makes our society fairer by making the cost of living more affordable for all. Now to the bad news. As nice as the new climate action website is, it is also hosting a blatant lie. Anyone who read the 2030 Carbon Zero discussion paper for the Destination Management Plan will remember that 3 methodologies were considered to calculate the emissions from air traffic to Queenstown, ranging from 44% to 92% of the district's emissions compared to the 2019 Pontin and Taylor report. Of course, that was quite inconvenient. So in the final report, Travel to a Thriving Future, our local tourism board reduced it to a more convenient 17.34%. The laws of physics do not care about magical thinking or about what is convenient to vested interest. We are an endangered species by our own fault, and nothing short of facing the fact can improve our future outcome. Lying about the impact of air travel is unacceptable. Here are a few suggestions on how to use the climate action website to actually improve our odds. Share real data about our emissions. Share live data about how fast global temperatures are increasing. Explain the connection between climate change and the cost of living crisis. Be clear about the need for everyone to boycott fossil fuels and polluting activities. Besides using the website, if the council is not going to ban the installation of fossil fuel appliances in new buildings, you could at least share the electric homes report with anyone applying for building consent. We know of the numbers, making the right choices also saves you money. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Kath Gilmore.
Unfortunately, I was told I was not allowed to because,
Okay, yes, under,
although I agree, I should be allowed to.
Well,
I need the credit, but
unfortunately, understanding orders, there is no discretion from the chair at all. It's a must, so thank you for coming along. Okay, there's public forum. Confirmation of agenda. I move that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. We have seconder.
Are we comfortable that councillor Cox will be available for item 1 because he can, as chair of that committee, might contribute to that? I'm just wondering whether do we flip it around to ensure that he's here for that?
He is going to be here at 2:15. We've got about, well, 7 minutes. Do we have him online? Where's my? Not yet.
Or can I suggest then we
We can go
bump 1 to 4
We can see
and
1 to 4.
well, just to give time. I mean, it's just a even the fees and charges might be enough. So 1 to
Keep the agenda as it is. We'll just move item one to whenever Councillor Fox turns up.
Sure.
Yeah, you just might have to listen to 5 or 6 minutes.
I move that with that change.
Yep, okay, seconder. Thank you, Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Good. Confirmation of minutes of the meeting. Or do we have any? None at all. Well, I'll move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council held on the 15th of February 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record. We have a seconder. Thank you, Esther. All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Looks like Miles with us.
Look at that.
His iPad.
Lyle, councillor Cox, your timing is impeccable. Item 1, project monologue hearing panel deliberations and recommendations, page 18 on your council papers. Councillors, we have with us Paul, yourself.
Yes.
Over to you.
Good afternoon. The move is to approve a consultation proposal for the Standing Street site. There were 2 topics in that. One was around some land exchanges, and the other one was a JV with Ngāi Tahu. Following the consideration of public submissions, the hearings panel have provided their recommendations, and the report that's in front of you, the resolution today, is consistent with those recommendations of the hearings panel. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Cox, I think you can hear us fine. Do you want to just speak to your report before we open to questions, or you want to keep moving along?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to briefly, just to explain the process. We had this the hearing panel, as you know, Melissa Ferg and myself were appointed by the council. We heard the submissions. The hearing was held on the 19th of February. Heard all the oral submissions. We had all the written submissions. Following that, we adjourned the hearing, reserved our decision, and then the 3 of us alone went into deliberations for a period of time. We came up with our initial high-level thoughts on it, reported back to the staff, and then went away and wrote a decision. And then after several iterations and discussions, we reported back to the staff. They made some recommendations on just minor editorials and maybe some extra commentary. And now you have in front of you the decision and our recommendations that we approved when we reconvened the hearing on the 21st of March. And that's about it. I've seen a fair bit of the commentary and emails that have been floating around. I'm happy to talk about that if necessary as it comes up. I'm not sure if the other members of the panel wish to say anything. Thank you.
4 questions. I'll just open up the panel. Do you have any further comment? Last pretty much covered it for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, questions, councillors?
kick off if you like. I understand, well, and appreciate the work of the hearings panel, certainly around the additional review and consultation on the site. I'm just unsure as to whether does that allow, does the action of that those recommendations under topic 2 impact our ability to meaningfully approve a strategy that is potentially in conflict with those other decisions? Does it stand alone? Does topic 1, does the land strategy stand alone without moving forward on those other things like the joint venture and stuff like that? Or do we end up in a internal conflict of purpose?
Look, I think what my take from the hearings panel recommendation is still a desire to look at the site from a holistic perspective. What that actually looks like, obviously there still needs to be some engagement with Crown and Tahu and look at those options. So until we really come back to you with, I think one of the other resolutions there was around coming back and reporting back to council for consideration of what that looks like with the program and the like. I'd probably hold short of trying to predetermine what that might look like at this point.
Okay, is it dependent on those things moving forward though, on the joint venture, and can the land strategy stand with alternative models, ownership models and things like that being progressed, or is it a specific set of circumstances that requires the joint venture and Ngāi Tahu's approval and the exchange of the reserve, or is it a starting point to move forward?
Yeah, so under our partner agreement with Ngāi Tahu, that had a certain scope to it, and the last commercial terms that we tabled at the August council meeting, the feasibility study, that had some commercial parameters, which was inclusive of both topics. But as we mentioned back then, they were only parameters and it was still subject to further negotiation. So until we go back and engage with Ngāi Tahu based on the direction of the hearings panel and yourselves on this, I think for me to start to answer what that might look like, and that's the option. I can't really talk for Ngāi Tahu at this point, but I think there's a clear direction around which to go.
So I think the answer is yes, this can stand alone from the Ngāi Tahu relationship, though Ngāi Tahu will be a party to this because of their RFR interest and their treaty settlement. So they will have parallel interest in this process, but it's not dependent, it's not reliant on the partner agreement. But they will, and they may form a view based on some of their expectations.
Progress that.
Yeah.
If that's the, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Okay.
Just a follow-on question.
Hang on. You don't want to use it up. You don't want to use your questions up. I'm giving you the fair crack at this. Rather well, but
I can
okay.
after five.
Okay, we'll go Gav and then we'll go back to Lyle. Oh, sorry, Matt. So, yeah, you go.
I appreciate the panel. They've done some good solid work on this. And from my perspective, I do want to unlock the potential of this site. The thing that I'm grappling with a little bit at the moment, and here's the question, is should we be having a clearer vision of what the strategy is before we look at a land swap? That's the question.
I guess that goes back to the original proposal and what was in front of the hearings panel, and what the recommendation is. So going back to August, it was a land strategy, and what we've taken from this is to continue with that option 1, which was more of a holistic approach, consistent with the SOP.
Hello?
Yeah, I just wanted to cover off well, Quentin was asking, when we put our recommendation decision, we were relying a fair bit on, I can't remember what it is in your agenda, but when we said we direct the CEO to report back to council the scope of the works program to actually do the land swap, we weren't preempting or understanding exactly what, if any, Ngāi Tahu property involvement would be, but we expected that would be reported back. And if the Ngāi Tahu, whatever their involvement had to be or required to be based on land ownership or the government requirements, would be reported back by the CEO under that direction in that recommendation.
But can I just clarify something? Given that was a response to mine.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you saying that recommendation 4 circles back into recommendation 3 in order to provide that additional investigation? That
Are you talking?
That seems to be Paul's understanding. So yeah,
That was my understanding.
is that your understanding? Well,
Yeah, sorry, I was going to have to pull up the agenda. I got the wrong. Sorry.
that's all right. Well, the recommendation 3 relates to the option 1 under topic 1, which is the land exchange proposal. Recommendation 4 is to direct the chief executive to report back on the scope of works program for ministerial approval and notifying land exchange for the reserves. Is that?
Yes.
So that circles back into the above recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And the disadvantages of option 1, you mentioned the land exchanges, or option 1 on the proposed land exchanges, which is what's recommended by the hearings panel. It suggests that it'll take some time to deliver. I was wondering if you could speak to the time and resource that it would take if option 1 was to proceed as a best guess.
The amount of time?
The amount of time and money, which is always open-ended, but.
Look, I can, there is no statutory timeframe around these, it's not subject to ministerial approval and a process, so this can take 18 months to 3 years to move through.
Okay. And then is there any cost that you can see being a significant impact that isn't prepared for in the report through the land exchange proposal?
Not directly relating to the decision today. Obviously, when we report back, we'll come back with the scope of works and there'll be some costings around that.
Okay.
Here's a technical question around the word adopt, because when to me, adopt means you're adopting what's in the report, and obviously we've got some things in the statement of proposal under option 1 for topic 1, which includes that we will do a land exchange in conjunction with Ngāi Tahu property and that the land will be jointly owned. And there wasn't a lot of discussion around that in the deliberation. So I'm just concerned about the word adopt in point 3, and just a question, I guess, for the chief executive is, what is your understanding, legal understanding, I guess, of the word adopt? What would we be doing? Because this could sit, I'm aware for, sorry, I'm carrying on. This could sit until another council comes along. And so how we understand it doesn't really matter. It's what's written in the words. So what does adopt mean in terms of point 3?
I think adopt means adopt, agree. It adopts option 1, which is the proposal to undertake the land exchange, but I suppose, and then subsequent to that gets qualified by the other resolutions in the pack.
But jointly with Ngāi Tahu, because there's nothing else in the joint resolutions about owning land jointly with Ngāi Tahu property, but that it is in the statement of proposal for that option which we're adopting.
But I think the subsequent resolution still requires this to be reported back and agreed by council.
So do you think point 4, even though it doesn't say a resolution of council will be required to proceed with the land exchange?
Well, I think resolution 4, just turn back to that.
It's reporting back with a scope of works, but not for a decision.
Well, I mean, I think, invariably, I don't think it's not intended not for that to be a council decision, so we would come back with the program works and council would agree that or not.
So if we were to clarify the wording, with an amendment to make it clearer of that intent, that would be.
I don't see there's any issues with clarifying that to say that there's a decision to be made by council. There's no intention for it not to be a decision of council.
Thank you. And just another question, I've got two more. One is explaining the right of first refusal process in terms of a land exchange. I'm just not clear, and some of the submitters and community weren't clear on exactly what rights Ngāi Tahu has if we request an exchange of the minister. Do they have a right of first refusal, or is it some other right?
No, they have a right under the Treaty Settlements Act.
Okay,
The right of first refusal is the right of the land being disposed.
okay, that's great. And the third question was just around the funding for the that we have in the draft LTP. Just wondering if you can clarify what years we are considering putting that into. Obviously, we haven't agreed to the LTP yet, and it needs to go up for consultation. But can you clarify where that is sitting
Funding for what?
for the council building?
Council building.
Yeah.
From memory, I think the latest recommendation should set and maybe someone in to I think year 7 or 8.
2028, I
think it was 2028. It's moved out a year from the original material that we sent back to council.
Okay, so it'll be 7 or 8 years from now.
I believe so. I can clarify that. I can't recall it from my head, sorry.
Thanks.
I've got a couple of questions. And initially, my first question was when I read that we were not going for a joint venture, and the decision for a location was to be revisited or revised, and I thought, well, what is the point of doing the land swap at this point in time? I can see some benefits potentially, but still not 100% convinced that now's the right time to do that. But anyway, the question I'm getting to is that the land swaps really result in not a Stanley Street frontage becoming freehold land. And I'm wondering what safeguards are there that then doesn't leave it open to being sold off if the council's in a situation where it needs that cash. Would it be protected to remain available for the use that we currently think it would be used for? I don't think it would be if it's freehold land. It's available to be disposed of in any way that a future council might see fit.
Well, I mean, those are decisions every future council has to make, and they could be sold out of need, or they could be sold to make an investment elsewhere. And that was the model that the Manawa project was caveated on, was creating value to enable us to deliver on those community assets. So that remains. If you're talking about the core that remains at the centre of the block, I mean, council could secure that by designating that for, because that would effectively, you could use a number of tools if you felt that protecting the core of the block where the cab was located and where the performing arts were located. You could do that by a reserve notation, or you could do that by some form of designation.
Yeah. So I know that core is remaining as a local purpose reserve, but there's been a series, obviously you mentioned on a previous workshop, 40 years of reports on the site. Most of them, all of them, are based around community facilities and arts centres, arts and cultural centres. My understanding is that those types of facilities can be built on that local purpose reserve land without any changes to the land.
Does depend how the land's notated, but it's generally a local purpose reserve for presumably community purposes or council community purposes would encompass that.
There was a 2003 report which went into a lot of detail about a proposed community centre. There was some legal advice in there that local government offices could be argued that they could be built on a land that was designated for community activities. Has anything come in since then that changes that opinion, do you know, or still?
They remain a potentially an arguable point. There will be parties that may say that that's not the intended purpose of that.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what I'm getting to with those questions is that all the ideas that are currently in play for that site could potentially be achieved without any land exchanges on the local purpose reserve land as it stands at the moment.
Well, again, some of that is said is contestable. But the purpose, go back to the core purpose, this was around consolidating land to achieve both the opportunity to build cab and to build the cab through, in this instance, a joint venture, but not necessarily. And therefore, and then to also be able to use some of the, what you might call the outer land, to enable us to invest in community facilities that the community want.
Yeah.
Or that the community, that the council identified.
So just to pick on that point then, to build the cab under a joint venture, the land would need to be freehold to really achieve that.
In a practical sense, yes.
Just a couple of other points. Number 15 on page 21 talks about, at the very bottom, talks about submitters highlighting concerns about traffic. I mean, I think that misses the point slightly. They're not, my reading of it was not that having a CAB on the site would increase the flow of traffic, but having it somewhere else would decrease the flow of traffic, is the thrust behind those submissions along Frankton Road, given that the majority of the population is out at the eastern end of Frankton Road and beyond. Anyway, that's just a point that I took from those submissions. I guess I was concerned also about the proposal for,
You got a question?
The proposal to swap to do the land exchange with the Robertson Street site. Has there been a full and fair evaluation of the value of that site? Because it didn't really come through in the consultation document.
No,
and whatever other options might be available for that site.
Well, in terms of valuation and understanding that site completely, that will come back as part of that resolution number 4 and the further report. The property team have spent a bit of time obviously looking and have received various requests for that site, but none of them have been progressed at this point. So I guess I'll go back to the original SOP, and the proposal was to utilise that site for a land exchange. That's what we're stuck with here, not stuck with, but that's what we're working through.
So that comes back to point 4 of the resolution, needing that council approval to progress from there.
Well, I mean, it's anything to do with the Robertson Street land would require a council decision in the event. Because you need this resolution to do that. That's de facto how that works.
And then the only other question I've got is Ballarat Street. The land exchange was carried on Ballarat Street. What would the timing of that be? Because at the moment it still needs to remain open to access what are going to be car parks for a number of years.
That just by changing the underlying status of the land doesn't mean it necessarily changes the use. So it can still be utilised as a road, but it just have a reserve status on it.
Okay.
Well, firstly, thanks to the hearing panel, because I think the recommendations that you put forward have captured the kind of essence of what was heard. Questions that I have are in very similar vein. So some of the concerns that came up through the submissions and the hearings were around the value of exchange to sell land without community input. And in order to move forward with the land swap and the land strategy, council and Ngāi Tahu have to make a joint approach to the Crown across those various parcels. So in a similar vein to some of the previous questions, is that without any new information, if we only use the information that we have to date and we move forward with the land strategy, I can only see us arriving at a similar conclusion. So my question really is around the partnership and our joint approach to the Crown across those various parcels. How can that look different than working together in a CCO, for example, or joint venture, how could that look different than what's already being proposed to us?
I think, well, the short answer to that is when we come back to council with the report around that scope of works, we would imagine that would be a lot more detail around some of the missing information that you're talking about. So
Okay,
if we can add, for example, up-to-date valuations and that sort of thing, that would be included in that resolution 4.
okay,
So I think probably turning it around now, looking at it another way, proceeding with resolution 3 and 4.
Yeah.
We will actually be able to understand more rather than the other way around. If we don't see, then we won't know any better.
yeah, okay, I suppose some of it is around semantic because we've got, you know, we're having updates on information is the language we're using, and we're not necessarily looking at new information. So my concern is that we'll end up at full circle with the same information, same decision making, and therefore the same conclusion. Anyway, we've got some amendments on the table, so.
I think that, to be fair, I mean, this sets and train a process. We don't know what the outcome of that
No, we
process
don't.
is. So there's possibly a different outcome to that process.
Yeah.
There's possibly a process that doesn't continue to have an ongoing commercial relationship with Otago. That's a possibility. And as Paul has said, obviously there'll be updated information through that process. So I think that if I understand what the panel was recommending, it's they saw value in continuing to proceed to actually daylight that information and put council in a better position to make those decisions.
And the only thing I would add to that is if we pull back a report to you with the same information, I would imagine that wouldn't go anywhere. You didn't make a decision.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we put it back on us to make sure that we have that information, and certainly sitting through the submissions and reading all the submissions and being part of that, I think there's a desire that's come through from the hearings panel in order to do that. So
Yeah,
we've heard that.
thank you. And I think the hearings panel used the language to include but not limited to, and that's been taken out in the resolution. So I guess just acknowledging that the hearings panel has tried, it's really hard with wordsmithing, but has tried to kind of capture a lot of thinking. And in the resolution, we just need to ensure that it does capture the thinking of the hearing panel and not limit it. So Lyle, I don't know if you wanted to, or any of the hearing panel wanted to speak to that at all in terms of the recommendations that you made and the language that you used around to include but not limited to.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, we, in the decision, we I mean, sort of reasoning and trying to explain why we came to our recommendations. It's very, it's not always easy to try and push everything into the recommendation. So a lot of the time, if you read the background to the recommendation and going forward. So yeah, not limited to. We can't specify everything. So you maybe those words could have been put in the recommendation. We relied on it being in the basis of our decision for those recommendations. And I understand what you're saying. Melissa, you got anything on it?
No, I do think not limited to was, I had put that in there actually. So I do hear what you're saying, and I guess maybe that's a question back to Paul and maybe Mike about what.
Might have just been a transfer thing, but if it's
yeah, I think there's definitely the understanding that this, because we're talking about different things here. Now we're talking about the proposed cab, right? And reviewing that, and that's the point that we're talking to. And I guess there were a couple of comments that have come through about that. So maybe it would be useful, Paul, the question is, I guess, what is the next step on that? Is it kind of your question? Like, how do you see that going? Because I think there's some questions around alternate site, alternate locations, sites, and whether we just clear that up to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that this is a review of, let's see where an alternative location could be, and then a comparison from that location to this
Yeah.
central location.
So just a transparent, in the background, as you guys are working through workshops, we've kept a variety of different options open, probably more the commercial sort of slant, you know, if you look at the commercial advice that we've been getting. And then I think there were about 7 different options where we had leasing in Franklin, new build in Franklin, leasing in the CBD, new build in the CBD versus the JV option route. So there were quite a few different options that we have looked at. Like I said, more of the commercial slant. What came through from the submissions in the public was more around some, let's say those not even economic, but community and wellbeing sort of elements of what our location might be and what that might mean for the community. So I've had some initial discussions with Mike around what that might look like. I've been talking with our policy team down at PMB as well, because they obviously do a lot of work around the spatial plan and all that sort of thing. I had a relook at our transport travel plan, which referenced things like the climate action plan. And that is the documents, but we should probably review that as well and see what other important documents would be there. But I think what we will do is we need to go away and review what that scope of work and work with Mike on what that looks like. And obviously that needs to come back to you. So going back to my previous point, if we come back with nothing new or haven't got the appropriate locations or we haven't met your expectations, then presumably we're going to get something like that along the way. So again, I think we have a bit of an understanding of what needs to come back. So obviously need to go through with Mike around what that looks like. Yeah. Hopefully that helps in terms of what that looks like.
Does that help you? Think so?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some amendments that are going to be talked to later, so I think the detail of those can be discussed at that point.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks to the hearing panel, I really like that it's separated out, that we can talk about one activating the site. We need revenue generating opportunities to develop community assets. My question hones in on the advantage of option 1, making additional parking available while we determine the future use of the site, and perhaps to pick up on Councillor Tuck's question about time to deliver that. It would be fantastic to see something happen on the Stanley Street site within our term, rather than just constant round and round and nothing eventuated. How quickly could we get parking there? Have we got any idea how many? What has to happen to take us forward on that pathway as a short-term solution?
Sorry, I can't answer that, but what we will do, I think it's the last resolution, is part of it, is we'll report back as well. So obviously, Mike's more across that than I was.
Staff have previously reported back to council with a number of car parking options for that site.
Is it hard to do? I suppose it's
No, it's not difficult to do. It's effectively clearing the site and enabling car parking to occur, putting in, parking management controls, access. So it's not a difficult task to do that once the site is cleared.
So if the land swap was to happen, we could expect to see a fairly fast turnaround on some temporary parking.
The temporary parking can probably happen without the land swap. That can happen in the interim.
I think the only issue was that it was unfunded, wasn't it? That the proposed car park design didn't have a funding line.
Wasn't entirely funded.
Yeah.
So that may be something, depending on the scale that the council wishes to adopt, then they have to come back for additional funding.
Lisa, that advantage, that last bullet point is probably more, if there was more commercial opportunities available on the site, then a long-term parking solution, if that was desired by the future council. So it goes back to the auctioneering, vis-a-vis, and I was aware of some of the previous discussions around trying to get a car parking building on that site with the reserve there. Doable, but a lot of the costs fall directly back. You can't share the costs with the private sector. It's much easier on freehold land. So that was part of that.
So that brings us back to that enabling advantage of doing the land swap for the freehold opportunities. So regardless of what we do, there's some funding opportunities to put back into the development of the community assets, whether they be car parks, civic forests, libraries, performing arts.
And bearing
whatever
in
it might
mind,
be.
there's enough reserve land retained there for, performing arts centres and visual arts centres and future libraries, none of which are funded currently. So do we need that, or do we need more reserve land? I mean, it's just purely like you said, it goes back to the optionality in future decision.
Okay, Lisa,
And lots of funding opportunity through.
Lisa, you got Lyle, I see you got your hand up, you want to answer a bit of Lisa's question, or?
Yes, please. Actually, it was the question before that. I just want to clarify. You talk about, there's been a lot of discussion about location versus site. Now, they're two different things. Location is for the current, well, the Stanley Street site is Queenstown. Other locations are Frankton, Wanaka, Arrowtown. But to do the comparison we're asking for at Stu, we're actually wanting the comparison with a site within a location. But yeah, it's a site, not a location. The location is a bigger thing if you go to the dictionary and have a look at it. So I just want to clarify that before we start trying to play around with those words too much and what we're actually after. Realistically, you've got to compare one site with another site, not a location so much with a location.
Barry, do you know?
No, I'll wait for comment rather than ask.
Okay, well, gone around, so I'll just do a couple of mine. So just clarifications on proposed, so this is for you, Lyle, and the panel. So for the proposed resolution 3, can I just get the panel's opinion? It is an intention to progress with the land swap.
It is an intention to progress with the land swap.
Thank you. 2, my second question, for the land status exchange, and this might be for CE, the land status exchange to occur, we as a council approach the Crown individually as a council. We don't actually go to the Crown with Ngāi Tahu as an individual council.
Well, I think we're required, I mean, we think we recognise that Ngāi Tahu are an interested party as a result of the Ngāi Tahu claim settlement act. We have to recognise that should any of that involve the relinquishment of land, then they have an AFR right. So I think that while we're able to go independently of Ngāi Tahu will be a part of that process. So given that we do have a practical relationship with Ngāi Tahu, we would seek to, I suppose, work with them. That's just being, I think, a good operator.
Thank you. All right, questions complete. We have the recommended resolutions in front of us. There's been many a chatter on the emails, I see. What I propose to do is I'll kick off with moving 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and then the amendments can come. I'm sure they will. So I'll move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Do I have a seconder?
I'll just clarify.
Thank you. We've got a seconder.
Councillor White.
Councillor White.
Thank you.
So I can have discussion.
Can I have a point of clarification? There seems to be a distinction between the original recommendation versus the version that's in which one are we working from? The panel's recommendation or the agenda's version of it?
The agenda version 1 through to 6. I'm actually,
I think I think the recommendation in the panel's report is the same as the one in the report. That's the discussion of the change decision and the regions that has some slightly different wording.
no, it's a discussion. Thanks. Sorry, Councillor Butler, I was trying to find out where the differences were themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, open discussion.
So I have proposed an amendment, which was circulated, proposed amendment for point 2.
Are we able to get it on the screen or?
It's the point to raise an amendment.
Yes, yep.
So the amendment that I've proposed, I've sent it to governance. Someone's got it available, but
it does include some of the wording that was in the decision.
If you want to talk to that.
Include some of the wording that was in the discussion on the decision and the reasons in the hearing panel's report that didn't make it into the recommendation wording. Including the section where it says, where does it say there? Including but not limited to. It's in the middle of point A. It also includes the assessing the main themes arising from the consultation, the use of public travel networks, and costs of building on flat sites versus inclined. Words that were all included in the discussion in the hearing panel's report.
Sorry, so
Yeah, so you're the seconder for those.
can I just ask for clarification, sorry, before we go to something?
Yeah.
So sorry, on C,
Hang on, are we discussing the amendment or are we, you want a point of clarification?
want a point of clarification on the amendment.
Or wait till we've got a seconder first and
Okay,
we might not need one.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Right, I know it's a stickler for process, but now you can ask.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, so the change that you've made on C is changing site to location.
Yes, it does actually change the word sites to locations.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that last we commented on that, but in my mind, I think we are looking at a location of the CBD versus a location outside of the CBD. Or maybe a number of locations outside the CBD.
Okay. So we're going to move on a second. We might discuss it now. Now we've had that clarification. Thank you. Where we go? Any discussion?
I suppose just to appreciate the thought that we don't want to limit ourselves to just one alternative option if there are multiple ones available. So putting the S or changing the, site or sites or something like that might be useful to the help with the options that come back to us.
And can I just talk to the intent of what the original
Yeah.
one was, and that was for it to be considered.
Multiple.
We never specified where the alternate site should be for the fact that that should be. If that makes sense, so this does semi-reflect what we were after. I think, would you agree with that, Ferg, in terms of what we were talking about? It doesn't.
Plural.
Yes, in plural, we never intended it to be only one site that should be looked at. It was this should be reviewed as a whole.
Okay, just a question. Does that make that clear for council officers?
Well, I mean, I think, again, I think there's the practicality of this. So I think that, yes, you would always be looking at more than one site, but you have to Councillor Cox's position, you actually have to come up with an actual site that you can compare, because there's no use, otherwise we're just comparing one theory against another. So we may have different locations, but we are likely to want to be able to say, here's a concrete site of X square meters, here's another concrete site of X square meters. These are possible sites, because otherwise we'll never reach a point of conclusion, which.
Can we
From my
just add
perspective,
sites?
well, I think from my perspective, the use of the word sites is far more useful than locations.
Yeah.
Because in identifying new sites, you can clearly look at other locations.
Yeah.
So, but you can't have a location without a site. So,
Okay.
let's
not meaningfully anyway.
So on
I
that,
would suggest that.
if the mover and the seconder are happy, we change to C locations to sites. If you're happy with that, so we can just bring that.
Well, that change actually comes up in B as well, as a location.
There and then.
Change locations was mentioned also in the hearing panel report.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's also up in the middle of A as well. And my original draft had sites / locations.
Hedging your bets.
Yes. I'll have a dog dictionary. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, as second, I was just going to say, I put forward through some suggestions yesterday. I used the word sites for the reasons that.
Okay, well.
But I think it's more, really what we're clarifying here is it's plural and it's about optionality.
Okay.
So I think if we do sites, it's.
So So what I'm doing here, mover and seconder, is A, B and C, where it says alternative locations or preferred locations, it changes to alternative sites.
Plural,
Preferred
yeah.
sites.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just as long as we are looking at alternative locations. So we need sites, but we have to have, well, you know, we could look at multiple sites within the CBD. But obviously the submitters were keen to look at other locations, and I hadn't even, you know, they didn't really go to Wanaka, I don't think, but you know, it's worth looking at. And it may be more than one site. To me, the idea is that it's kind of, if we were to do this, and I don't know what time it's appropriate to do it, but it would be starting from scratch, doing what was done in 2016, as you alluded to, I think, Paul, looking at a long list and a short list and looking at the criteria and what made it into the recommendation was look like a comparison with what we have, but I think it needs to be broader than that. Especially as when we have funding is 7 to 8 years away. Need to be really careful with the criteria and the context around it. So I think for me, it would be keeping a really open mind and kind of starting from scratch with our options. Making sure nothing's discounted.
Hang on, I'll hold you there. I've got the mover and seconder that have said they'll do the sites, go to sites instead of locations. So I'll just keep moving on with it, take on board. So any further? Go ahead.
I just wanted to. I don't know, I want to speak. Firstly, sorry, quite. It's right. I firstly want to acknowledge and thank Councillor Cox, White and Ferg for their efforts on the panel. I know there was plenty of stress and a lot of care when considering your recommendation. I also want to thank the members of the community who have gotten involved in the process, took time to submit, and also to those who spoke. Not forgetting that public speaking is the biggest fear in the world and ahead of spiders and death. The greatest skill I've learned as a designer is to be comfortable in the unknown, to let go of the safety of an idea and to be shaped by the exploration of the process in order to come up with truly great solutions. I worry that Manawa has held on too tightly, that this process has been overly managed to make small wins towards a predetermined outcome which nullifies the point of consultation. It's abundantly clear that the community is stressed about being ignored by way of narrowly framed questions that ask to disregard the bigger picture, the consequence of which will foster further resentment in our relationship. I acknowledge also that public trust in us by our own summation is at an all-time low. To further contextualize the environment we're in, we are telling our community to brace for a costly and uninspiring 10 years, to have low expectations on what council will be able to deliver in the coming years because there's just no room left. In fact, most of this term, councillors have had to front our communities bearing the painful consequences of others' decisions with no win outcomes. So it's pretty safe to acknowledge that there's some PTSD when suggesting more Queenstown CBD-centric joint ventures with open-ended costs. If we care at all about rebuilding trust with the public, we need to put more trust in them. To have the conversation honestly, with an open mind and all cards on the table. Not only is it our community's money, they will also have to pay the opportunity costs of pursuing this project in a financially constrained future. If this is the right thing to pursue, the right place for it to be, and we let go of trying to control how the community may influence it, it will come back. Great ideas are usually the end result of great processes. I acknowledge that if I disregard all of the nuance of our circumstance and consider the merit of a land swap, I see the sensibility, and that the vision of Manawa is admirable. But my role here isn't to ignore the wider picture when making these decisions. In fact, it's the opposite. And I can't resolve how in the sacrifices we're having to make that spending more time and scarce resource on this now is reasonable. So my stance. I haven't been given any confidence to suggest that we have demonstrated sufficient oversight or control in joint ventures to pursue another one at this time. And while I appreciate that the land swap may be more reasonable, it is a hard sell when negotiating our fiscal priorities and allocating limited staff time. Knowing that even in the best case for this project, it will not improve the accessibility for civic participation for surrounding communities like mine, it will still be asked to spend 3 hours in the car to have a voice for 3 minutes. It will send a message to the community that when times are tough and trust is low, we will spend our efforts on enabling better office spaces for our organisation. It will undermine the efforts of the Upper Clutha, who are seeking more autonomy on its future by asking it to pay for yet another Queenstown-centric asset. What may seem like harmless and procedural decisions are in fact the voice of this organisation. Or in the words of James Frick, don't tell me what your priorities are, show me where you spend your money and I'll tell you what they are. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Where
Um,
it's on the amendment, just to make a clarification, it's on the amendment for number 2 we're talking about.
to give an opportunity to make.
To the substantive motion about past that, yes, just so everyone's clear on this, where we're at.
That's the version on the screen.
So it's the version on the screen of part of a substantive
Yeah.
motion that we still haven't voted on yet. So you're all clear, okay?
I think I'll still say.
Yeah.
The bit I want to say is around determining our preferred way forward on these alternate sites and things. I want us to go back to what question are we trying to answer? Because the original question that was proposed back in 2016 was, how do we get locals back into town? And I think the questions that our public are asking us to consider is, where are we going to put our staff at the end of our lease agreements when our rents ratchet up? And I think we're at real risk of going in piecemeal and just approaching the building only question. So whether it sits here or whether it sits in later discussion, I want to know, what questions will we answer? How will we proceed with that investigation, having clear objectives around the sites or locations or whatever, the process, the time frame, the work streams, and that really clear proposal around subsequent consultation and the difference between engagement and consultation. So whether it's to the amendment or to the broader picture, the reason we landed on the things we're discussing today is because we were trying to answer the question, how do we get locals back into town? And getting them to come in and do their admin tasks was one piece of that jigsaw puzzle. The question that we're getting pushback on our community is, where are we going to house our staff, and is there even a need for that? It's a very different conversation. So I'm just concerned that we're getting down into the weeds without going back to what is our agreement with our community for any case for change, and what are our preferred ways forward. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Right, I'll put it to the vote. You have it before you there. Number 2, amendment to the substantive motion moved by Councillor Bartlett and Councillor Whitehead. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Well, I take it you said yes. Put your hand up.
You wait.
Oh, I didn't realise I was allowed to vote, but never mind. I thought I had to be there.
Yes. Right, I'll start again. All those in favour? Aye. That was an aye, yeah, yes. None. Passed unanimously. Right, we're back to the substantive motion. Councillors.
We do have another amendment to vote.
Yeah.
Right,
So, councillor Whitehead and I worked on this together. It doesn't actually matter who puts it.
No, don't mind, you go for it.
Okay, so, this is for points 3 through to 6. We did start, and this is my fault, from the recommendation that was in the panel's report rather than the recommendation in the staff report. And I think governance staff have made a few changes along the way, so it might be slightly different, but the intent should be the same. So I think that having listened to the discussion that we had at the start.
Hang on.
Oh,
Let's
sorry,
go
you're
through
right,
your-
I need to
Yeah.
put this. For point 3, do you want me to read it out? Or
No, just say 3, 4, 5 and 6. I
Three.
move, and then we'll go to the secondary, and then we
Okay.
can start
Sure.
through.
So I move the amendments on the screen, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Away you go.
Excellent, thank you. So look, there's a couple of things here. What we tried to do was capture the intent of what we thought was the intent of the panel after having a couple of conversations, but to put in a couple of safeguards, just around the wording, and make sure that we got the information back that we needed and that we were going to have a further decision on it. And having listened to the discussion through the question time, I think this is where we're all at anyway. We have written in point 3, agree to further investigate. Happy to change that. We thought maybe better wording would be agree to give further consideration to option 1 under topic 1. It doesn't sound very strong, but it is agreeing a direction. And then obviously in point 4, that is the further consideration and the request for the detail on the information that we would need to come back to make a decision to actually adopt option 1. I think wording is important. I've mentioned this a lot, but future council may have to deal with this resolution, and there's a bit of discussion around, oh, we understand what we mean. We can, you know, if we get it wrong, you'll send it back. We have to write this for a future council that may include none of us. And it needs to be really clear. So that's why we've taken a bit of time to make sure that all the information that we think needs to come back is in there under the direction in 4. And what's why we didn't want to say we had already adopted, because by adopting option 1 for topic 1, we are agreeing to go into joint ownership of the freehold land with Ngāi Tahu, and we haven't made a decision on that yet. I think that's for a future decision. So that's point 3 and 4. I'll come back because it looks like there might be questions. Point 5, just taking out the suggestion that we may still do a CCO. So we've written agree not to proceed with the establishment of a council-controlled organisation jointly owned with the NTP for the purpose of owning land jointly and or owning, constructing and administration building at this time. Those are staff words or the words of the panel, but we've just left out the rest. And so that if we don't agree to go ahead with a new investigation into a new council building, this makes sense. We can always go back and agree to do a CCO after point 2, so the further investigation. If the governance options bring up Ngāi Tahu again, then we can go back there, but it just makes it simpler. And point 6 is around the car parking. It's a really simple change. The direction of the panel was to consider options to maximise the number of public car parks. We're just suggesting that it should be options, and of course, options to maximise should be within that. But we've had previous discussions about Stanley Street sites, and they do include a number of trees, and we have given some direction that maybe we could sacrifice some car parks to protect a few trees. So that was simply the reason to take out the maximum. Obviously, we'd like to see what maximum looks like as well. So basically, this is just around clarifying. It's to make sure that we're not agreeing something that we haven't actually considered, and that when we do agree something, we have all the information, including the terms that Ngāi Tahu might put forward for joint land agreements, land ownership, and making sure that we understand any money that the Crown is going to require for equality of exchange, because that's really important. Obviously, we're doing this to get some money for the council coffers if we were to do it. But if that payment for equality of exchange is too high, then why would we do it? So I think that's really important to understand what the value is before we agree to adopt. So subtle wording changes and some requests for additional information, which I believe is along the lines of what we discussed in the question time.
Can I speak to it a second?
Yeah, you can reserve your right to speak at the end. So, yeah,
Have we had a second?
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
right.
it's not speaking.
I have
Are you going to speak now, or are you going to reserve your right to speak at the end?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Right,
Well
I
done.
have some questions for the movers then, if that's all right. I'm okay with your suggestions, with the exception that I think that the bit about Ngāi Tahu property and the terms sits better in 5, which is subject to the approval of council anyway. With the original wording, I don't know why we would include agreeing terms on something we don't know whether it's going to proceed or not. So I would prefer striking out C and keeping 5 as is, which achieves exactly the same thing. And
That's for topic 2. So the land swap is topic 1. See the difference? So,
Yeah, okay.
so, yeah, 5 is for the CCO, that's for topic 2 for the council building JV. But option 1 for topic 1, within the statement of proposal document assumes that we will be doing a joint deal and joint ownership of the exchange there. And that's what 4 speaks of.
Yep, sorry.
Makes sense?
Yeah, question. It looks like number 6 on the screen there is the same as what was in the original resolution. It doesn't look like
I
it's
think
taken
that's
out
a
of the next
governance transfer thing, which has been corrected right now.
one.
So
Okay.
just options to provide public car parks at the Stanley Street site was what we had.
For clarification, we're going to look at each point individually, or we?
We can vote that way if you want to vote that way. Okay.
Can I comment?
Yeah, go for it.
So there's quite a few parts to this, and I can speak a little bit to, I guess, where we got to on some of the original ones, but with regards to the CCO, our original number 5 pretty much means that any CCO, including land ownership, needs to come back to council anyway. But so I know that you think that it's separate, but this says this says for the purpose of owning land jointly or the CAB. None of that is currently approved, and that has to come back to council regardless of what
But
it's
it
for.
says for topic 2. See, so topic 1 is the land exchange, topic 2 is the CAB. So if you took out topic 2, and if you said that would be the other way to do it, agree not to proceed with negotiating a joint venture in partnership with Ngāi Property Limited at all, and took out topic 2, but then you would be negating the whole point of going out, because as the chief executive said, we have to consider Ngāi in this, and
No, I know we have to consider them. I'm just saying it would come back to a council decision if it went ahead.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mike,
Yeah.
or have I misinterpreted that?
That's
well, it's making a decision. It says in 5, it says we agree not to proceed. And so then you're saying we're not going to proceed with a joint thing for the land exchange. So you're agreeing to go out to do the land exchange on our own terms without Ngāi, and we can't do that, which is why I've included it in 4.
Just a point of clarification, joint ownership of the land resulting from the land exchange is separate to working together through our Ngāi planning.
Yeah.
So in order to enact the land exchanges.
Hang on.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Any further? Lyle?
Yeah, well, I've heard of this before, but I think the intention, the way it's written, is I think we're overcomplicating. We're starting to put things in there and specifying things. What about things you aren't specifying in the amendment? That mean they don't have to look at those things. So once you start specifying things like the cost of Crown money and things like that, that's why we're relying so heavily on 4 to come back with the process, and in that I'd expect to know, the costs of it, the timing, all that sort of thing. So I'm just getting a wee bit confused on why we're trying to make so many additional changes, which I believe is complicating it unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you all. Any further? Okay, I'll let it go before I know Esther wants to have her right and then the mover. The amendment before us 3, agree to further investigate, is that the word? That's completely different to what's before us and what the hearings panel has actually submitted to us. My question before was the proposed resolution 3, not the amended one before us, is an intent to progress the land swap. What we have here is a proposed amendment to actually further investigate. There's a very different change of intent there. This panel went through and listened to all of the submitters. They went away, and I know they did a fair bit of work in deliberating. I would rather, and my preferred option is obviously, because we delegate the authority to the hearings panel to give us the recommendation. They've done a lot more work on it. And I will probably vote towards it's keeping 3. And because of that view, 4, C and D are irrelevant. So that just brings us back to what 4 is in front of us now on our papers. 5, I agree with the recommended panel's view of 5. And now 6, let's be clear here, we've got a community that has been screaming out for car parking in CBD. We do have a standing resolution to put car parking into Stanley Street, put by the previous council. It's about time this council actually started putting car parking in the CBD. And the more the merrier is my view. So I'll be putting my view behind the existing 6 that the panel has put for us. I think playing around with words on car parking, I think for CBD, just get on with it, put some temporary car parking in there. I think that is definitely what is needed and what this community has been asking for. So we've got to, I'll hand it over to Seconder and then the move it.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we tried to capture here is the intent of the panel, and speaking also with the chair of the panel, was my understanding from the intent was that the adopting on point 3 in our conversation was that it's basically not explicitly written, but the understanding was that it's probably going to take some time and that it will come back to us, that it will probably do all of those things, but it's not explicit. So what we've tried to do is really just to make that explicit. So I think the word investigate is probably not helpful, and I would probably suggest consider. But I think agreeing to further consider is actually what we are doing, and adopting is not a particularly useful word, given the nature and time that this is going to take. The word "and" between the 2 is just simply connecting, making sure that when we are agreeing to further consider this, that it's really clear that we are coming back with each of these aspects. So I would be happy to take some suggested changes on A, B, C, and D, and what not to include or to change. For example, Q's suggestion. But yeah, we've really tried to consider what's been spoken to us from the chair of the hearings panel, and to make it explicit. I think in your words for the CEO, you said that it would come back to full council, but it's not necessarily explicit in the current resolution.
Yeah, so just to sum up, look, I think what Ms just said, that the hearing panel had an intent to progress option 1. I don't disagree with that. That is what I intend to mean by agree to further investigate. But the words adopt option 1 under topic 1, that has connotations, because within option 1, topic 1, it is very clear that we're going to be owning the land jointly and doing a deal with Ngāi Tahu property, and we don't know what that looks like yet. And so unless we know what it looks like, how can we agree it? And that is the point behind all of this. By softening adopt to, and we can change the words to further progress, that's not a problem, because that's the intent. But we need to know everything that we've written into form. We need to know what would be payable to the Crown before we agree to do this, because that's the value, right? We need to know what the value is of the deal. We need to know what the terms are. What are Ngāi Tahu's terms for doing this? We can't adopt it and agree to do a land exchange until we know what those terms are. That would be fiscally irresponsible. And D, bringing the matter back to full council for a decision on whether to proceed. I thought that was obvious, but the mayor's just said, no, we're going to adopt it, and then D is redundant, and so we won't be bringing the matter back to full council because we've already adopted it. And that is the whole point of writing what we've written. Give us another chance to get all this information that we need, and then make a decision with all the information, because that's our job, right? In terms of the car parking comment, I have no problem with car parking. I think that's the intent, right? Everybody wants car parking. It's just that there's no need to write down just the maximum number of car parks, because there will be some people that might like to protect some trees as well. And so let's just put the options on the table, and they don't have to be maximising options. In fact, if you're maximising, that's one option, right? You need to look at some other options as well. So this is just wording, but it is really important that we do not adopt option 1 under topic 1 right now, because we're agreeing to things that we do not understand and costs that we do not understand, and that's irresponsible. So, thank you.
Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Matt, you asked to go each individual one, so we'll just go that way. Okay, so this is an amendment to the substantive motion number 3. All those in favour?
Just hold the hands up so that we.
4, 5.
6 against. That's 6. Closing, we've got a casting vote, so that's no. No? Okay, number 4. Let's direct the chief executive. All those in favour? 4, 5. Against? 7. Number 5. All those in favour?
Of removing the wording, is that what we're doing here? Striking out. Okay, yeah.
4 against. 8. Yeah. And number 6, all those in favour?
I don't understand what the change is there, because there's no change on the board.
I think he's changing
Can't
it,
go on.
not only maximising
3.
options.
Hang
but
on,
options.
we've got to vote. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, there's a vote and focus.
1, 2,
Is that a hand up?
4, 5,
Give it to me.
6.
6. All those against? Okay, one of you voted twice. Come on. Come on, councillors. Switch
Can we
on.
just clear up what we're?
Hang on. Number
what we're
6,
voting on?
voting
Point
on
of order, what are we voting on? Because what's on the thing is
direct
not
chief
what we-
executive to report to council regarding car parking.
So that was not what I wrote and sent through. It was just
Provide.
options to provide car parking. That's the only thing.
So who's writing this? Okay, well,
It's just removing the word optimal.
it's the one that's before us that I've got in front of me. Direct the chief executive to report to council regarding options to
Yeah.
provide car parking at the Stanley Street for the medium term.
Yep, correct.
That is what you
Yeah.
wrote.
Yep,
Okay.
correct. It wasn't the same on.
Okay. So all those 4 for number 1, 2, 3,
Sorry, what's that? You voting on 6?
6. 6?
Yep.
Okay, all those against? 6, casting vote, no. Right, thank you, councillors. Now moving to the substantive motion we have before us. The mover is myself, seconded by, can you remind me, councillor White. We've got 1, amended 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 before you. All those in favour?
Oh, can we take these separately, please?
Wait,
Discussion.
Oh, yes, well done. Yeah, well done. Sorry. Let's get in the process. But anyway, go for it. Discussion.
Okay. Think about it. So just in terms of the overall view on the site, I mean, my comments have written down a few notes. The hearing panel report notes considerations for the Stanley Street site dating back to 2016, but we've obviously seen reports that go right back to 1980 as soon as the high school left the site. The proposals were put in place at that time for the site to include community and arts purposes. Initial considerations then were based around using the existing buildings at the site. But over the time since then, buildings have been progressively demolished, removed or scheduled for demolition or removal. The site's reverted to car parking. There's a comment made that the site appears to be underutilised, but really that's a result of those decisions that have been made over the last 40 odd years. The other point was that the art centre, QPAC rooms and play centre are the last ones surviving. QPAC rooms are gone now. All of them were used until quite recently. In my view, it's a shame to see those spaces lost over recent years. The working group report that I referred to earlier in 2003 again focused on a community centre for that site. There was consideration at that time to locating council offices on that same site, but between then and when the report was updated, or the working group updated their work in 2007, the design brief, the council offices were removed from the design brief site for whatever reason. It wasn't clear to me why. Having attended to the hearing and listened to all the submitters and reading the submissions, I'm pleased to see that the panel's recommendation did include a reconsideration of proposed recommendation to direction to reconsider the proposed location of the CAB. I've mentioned previously that I've always been a supporter of maintaining council offices in the CBD, but my time in this role has opened up the possibility to me that other options may be justified based on the feedback that we've been getting and need to be properly considered, which is the situation we're getting to, I think. Without confirmation that the CAB location will be at the site, I'm still not convinced that the land exchanges are necessary at this point in time. Previous plans focused on community facilities and even the car parking options seem to me to be able to be achieved on the land as it currently stands. I'm currently leaning towards leaving the land status as is, or if further work towards exchanges is carried out, that a final decision is brought back to council for approval.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I would just like to thank all of the staff and all of the submitters that worked on this. It was, that was good working with Councillor Cox and Ferg. The recommendation has considered all the submissions written and spoken. We've reviewed them a number of times. There was a really strong voice in opposition to the location of the cab, which is not what was consulted on, in the JB, and I do think the recommendation reflects that. The continuing with the land swap does enable many potential futures for this site and keeps us moving forward.
Yeah, just through the chair, I'd just like to make a comment just to say that I feel that it's a starting point for all parties. It's been a very chewy process to date. For me, I felt the emphasis on the siting and not as much on what we were consulting on brought added scrutiny and discussion, which I feel the panel has listened to. I'm relatively comfortable where we landed on the land swap and the CCO and Ngāi Tahu, although I did seek some clarification around the potential for fallout in the relationship between QLDC and Ngāi Tahu properties as their DNA is ever expanding in this district. Now, this still has a long way to go. This is not about funding, it's far from it. It's about potentially enabling. Our job was to present a recommendation to you, the full council, after submissions, and that is what we've done. Your input is vital, as we've seen today and heard today. But I would like to thank our chair, Councillor Lyle Cox and Councillor Melissa White. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Wong for his belated conflict of interest. Thanks, Matt. It's been quite the process. It's been a personal learning and an enriching experience to be a part of. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further discussion?
I've sort of got a comment for Councillor Bartlett in a way, just trying to understand are the changes that have been.
This is a discussion.
Can't cross-examine. Okay, I'm not cross-examining. Can I clarify whether the changes to the wording that we're investigating now, rather than adopting the strategy, address your concerns around further work on that?
Hang on, in discussion. Yeah. Right.
He may choose to make a comment about his.
Yeah, you get one go. Yeah, you go.
Look, mine is just around timing. So we've been caught as council with, you know, lots of recommendations from the past and reports from the past, and we're being asked to progress things based on that, based on reports that recommended this CAB, you know, for reasons that probably no longer exist, as you know, has been alluded to already. So I'm just concerned that given we haven't got money until years 7 and 8, and things generally get deferred, and so potentially until later, why would we spend good money now doing an investigation into where we should have a council building that we've spent money for? You know, what we should be doing is asking the chief executive to do a rental strategy and look at where and how we rent until we have funding. Back in the day, they did it ahead of time, but there was a lot of headroom back in the day, and we have no headroom going forward. We're really tight. So to me, going ahead and doing an investigation under point 2 of the recommendation or the motion, it's just wasted money. And I think it's really irresponsible to go ahead and do that at this time. I think this project is for another council down the line, and it's the right thing to do, but down the line closer to the time so that we get the assessment criteria right. Same thing for the land exchange for me. It's something that needs to be considered holistically. I think what we risk doing is doing this land exchange, which will cost us, and we don't have money, and so we will need to sell to make the exchange occur. And then we miss the opportunity to take that whole site in its entirety and do the right thing. So I think these are all good things to progress at the right time. For me, now is definitely not time, and it could lead to some pretty awkward, unfortunate consequences if we progress this piece by piece, just because we can get a little bit done. We need to be thinking more holistically on behalf of the community. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
But go the car park.
So one of the things that came through from the hearing panel recommendations was the concerns around values of exchanges to sell the land without community input. And so I don't feel that the land exchange is necessary to do now, mainly for that reason. There was lots of discussion about Robertson Street, the different values and lack of consultation. Back in August, we were asked to adopt the draft statement of proposal for consultation on Manawa. I stated then that we were asking the wrong questions, and that was proven to be the case. It was poor consultation process. The panel recognised this, even if it wasn't said explicitly, through obviously the recommendations that have been made. So thank you for that, because I think you recognised that the scope was perhaps not right, and what came through you've taken on board with the lack of support for the JV. You know, the Collier's report back in 2016 made it quite clear that between 5 and 8 years' time, we should be looking at different locations. I don't think I need to labour the points that have been laboured through the hearings panel, but yeah, we don't have the money. This is for a different council. So I don't think it's the right time to be moving forward with the land exchange. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Perhaps following on a little from Councillor Whitehead's comments around the proposal for subsequent engagement and consultation with our community. I went back to the AAP2 scale of public participation around engagement and consultation and the various definitions, because I think this is something that quite often we trip ourselves up on, what is meant by these terms. And I looked at consultation being to obtain public feedback on analysis, alternatives and or decisions. And the promise around consultation is that we inform, listen, acknowledge concerns and aspirations, and provide feedback on how public input has influenced our decisions. And therefore I think we've actually done pretty good consultation, because we have informed, we've listened, we've acknowledged the concerns and aspirations, and we've provided feedback on how the public has influenced the decision. I think we've got a huge opportunity before us to look at how we engage with our community moving forward around engagement before we get to consultation, because consultation is around presenting some choices and decisions. But here's an opportunity for us to get really clearly defined around our problem statements and to gather very good evidence to support those problems. What I see about the promise of engagement is that we need to promise to keep you informed. We need to involve the public throughout the process and to involve our elected members more as well in this process, because I think what I hope our community have seen through this is a gaining of trust in this elected body as being people who are listening and taking on board the feedback around the loss of trust and confidence and transparency from our governance body. I want to see involvement of our arts, our culture, our heritage strategy group, our iwi, the 80+ different ethnicities we have in our community. Engagement also asks us to collaborate and to partner with public in every aspect of our decision, including the development of those alternatives and incorporating that in our future decision making. I do not want to kick the can further down the road to the next council or the next council to be doing this. I want to empower our community. The final decision is in the hands of the public. You decide, but we must get clear on what our problem statements are. We need well-defined problems supported by good evidence, and we need to engage with public participation and elected member participation to get us there before we consult again on whatever sites end up in that final decision. Thank you.
Further discussion? Just want to thank the panel, and I'll actually single out the chair. I know he took on the chair's role reluctantly, given the nature of the subject. I also want to thank the public that actually did make the effort to submit. And I think from the resolutions that are before us now, the panel did actually listen to you and actually change and direct this council to make changes. I disagree that this is going to be another council's decision. It may well be, but it is incumbent on us to make sure that the options available to the next council are open. I think the resolutions before us allow that to happen. And from that, I'm going to put this to the vote.
By division, please.
By division, can we do 1 and 2 together and 3 to 6?
No.
Because we've done all those.
Oh, you can put 1 and 2, I guess it doesn't matter whether you note or not.
3 and 4 probably sit differently to.
Sorry?
I think 3 and 4 sit differently to 5 and 6, don't they?
Yeah.
So 5 and 6 together and 3 and 4 individually?
Yeah.
1 and 2 together.
Yeah,
3
okay.
together.
So,
Together.
it's on your papers, it's only 2 that's changed and you wrote it.
That's what I
So
wanted
I'd
to
speak
speak on
to-
to question you had before
Well,
about
I was
changing.
gonna say, where did we get to on-
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
No,
So.
no.
No, it's only
Oh,
yours
that
that's
didn't pass.
changed.
So the
So-
investigate didn't pass.
No.
So before you, hang on, before you is 1, 3, 4, 5 and 6, what is written in your council papers. Number 2 has been amended by the amendment put forward by councillor Bartlett, with locations changed to sites. Are we all clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Brilliant. So I'm going to put 1 and 2 to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against?
Against, can I get that recorded?
Item 3, all those in favour? 6. All those against? So 6, casting vote, it's a yes. Item 4, all those in favour? 6. Against? 6. Casting vote, yes. 5 and 6, I mean, keep up 5 and 6 together. All those in favour? And against? And 1, do you like that recorded, councillor?
Yeah.
All good. Thank you, councillors. Item 1 is complete. Thank
Might be
you.
a record in there.
Thank you, Mr. Speedy. We'll take a 5-minute break. I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. We can all stretch our legs and take a deep breath.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Resume the meeting. Item 2, fees and charges, page 35 of your council papers. Got a whole line up here.
I think Burns was going to actually introduce the topic, is that correct, Ken? Yeah. And the Burns is online there.
Over to you, Mr. Burns.
Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies, I can't be there in person today, but I've been asked to stand in for GM Corporate Services on this item. So just a couple of introductory comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. We've got most of the officers here that have the relevant detail to answer questions. So today we're looking for a decision to approve consultation on a set of fee increases for the 24-25 year. The statement of proposal has been prepared detailing those proposed increases. And the process, as per normal, will allow for public submission, a hearing and a final decision on the 27th of June. It's normal for us at this time of year to look to review fees in order to maintain compliance with our revenue and financing policy. However, that consultation is normally undertaken in conjunction with an annual plan or long-term plan, but this year is different because we have a delayed timetable for the new LTP. So that's why we're going out with a standalone consultation on these fees and charges. So we'll take the report as read, and hopefully we can answer your questions if you have any.
Questions?
Just a very quick one, page 52, it's got a section of the fees table out on its own. So I wasn't sure whether that was just a formatting thing, but the title of that field says aquatics, Queenstown and Monica pricing, but should that be relating to outdoor fields or something along those lines?
Probably a heading problem, not water rugby. Probably water polo.
That's fine.
We'll amend that. Now it's not chocolate fish.
Any questions?
Yeah, just looking at the percentage increases and moorings and jettings, I'm sure other councillors are going to have some questions about this. It hasn't been reviewed for 13 years. I'd like someone to comment on how we standardise the review period process so that we don't get in a situation where we're waiting decades for these fees to increase, just for those that are listening today who may be impacted by some of these fees increases.
If I answer that, I mean, I'd love to go with an annualised fee increase for that very reason, because unfortunately over time fees do tend to lose relevancy, and then we have to make a correction, and often it becomes quite a significant percentage increase, even if in some occasions it's not a significant fiscal difference. I mean, there is a bit of a trade-off between the amount of effort required to do a fee review to discover you want to raise something by 50 cents versus, so, but certainly doing it on either a rolling annual or a biannual basis would, in my view, be an appropriate way to go. And that's what we're trying to move towards, a more regular updating of our fees rather than these large gaps. But I mean, Mr. Burns might want to comment. Stu, if you've got any thoughts on that?
I agree generally with what you've said, Mike, except that it'll probably be annually or 3 yearly with the long-term plan.
Yeah. Yeah. But yes, not these large gaps that we've occasionally come up against.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
So there was some information circulated around some alternative models for the mooring fee increase particularly. And as you guys will know, I've challenged the premise of those quite hard in terms of the actual costs and the what is actually required to solve the problem, which is to ensure moorings are safe, basically. Can you tell us about what you're now recommending, if that's changed at all, or are you sticking with the original?
perhaps I can answer that. So, yes, thanks, Councillor Smith, because you have raised it and it's caused us to review things. So I think, firstly, we no longer recommend the $800 increase because we've gone back and relooked at it and identified that some of the costs that we're attributing in there weren't directly related to private moorings. There were some public mooring fees. Equally, however, we wouldn't recommend simply going all the way back to simply charging an administration fee, which is the $300 on 330 option. I think that's in the memo that was circulated just before the meeting. Council has wanted, and certainly once council took over this part of the business back from the previous operator, the need to actually start to manage moorings from both a safety and compliance and licensing point of view has become apparent. And that's where the proposal for the additional fees come in. I think we would be comfortable to recommend either the annual inspection or the biannual inspection, so that we'd be only inspecting those mooring blocks once every 2 years. So that would either leave you with a fee of 600. Sorry, I'm going off my own. 60 for an annual one, or 500 for a one inspection every 2 years. And I think, given that this is a new fee, I mean, I think obviously we will continue to monitor how well and effective that service is, and whether we think that could be adjusted in 3 years' time would be something that would be reasonable to do in this instance. So our recommendation would, and sorry for not quite sitting on the fence, but either the 660 or the $500 fee, and again, we think that that's a reasonable apportionment of cost to that. Noting that there will be some increase in terms of the amount of money council will have to fund to support that service. That's not related specifically to that, that's related to actually picking up the cost of doing the community moorings.
And look, I appreciate the direction of travel on that, if you like, that we've given some options, which I think is important, but equally going back to square bases to sort of understand what's the problem we're trying to solve. And as I understand it, we still, in addition to the inspection that we are charging, they will still be required to have an independent dive inspection. And from that perspective, there appears to be duplication still in purpose anyway, as to what are we trying to achieve. And I can't reconcile that still.
So, and I think I tried to point it out in the memo, the inspection of the chain is one aspect only of that. So whilst it is, and I do acknowledge we use the word safety, but it's not entirely around safety. It's around ensuring that the buoys remain in their specific location, that people aren't shifting them, that people aren't actually overloading the moorings with bigger boats. That basically there's effectively an enforcement of the license regime. So there's an element of safety for sure, but actually the owners do remain responsible, given that there are multiple consents. There's a license to occupy on the surface, but there's a consent they need to have for the actual mooring buoy and for the chain and the water column. So they do perform slightly different functions.
But equally, they could be subject to monitoring charges under a resource consent to monitor conditions of consent, including the location and stuff like that.
No, I don't believe that would be a monitoring charge for that. This is a separate process around the administration of the mooring site.
With respect to be the first resource consent I've ever seen out of this council that doesn't have a monitoring condition on it.
I can't comment on that.
I don't think it's true, but this is for a different purpose, not an RMA purpose. I'm not sure how you can charge an RMA fee for the purpose of this.
Well, as I said,
if I can just comment through the chair, Councillor Smith, the monitoring fee for resource consents is for land use activities. So one-off resource consents that occur and council monitors whether the consent has been carried out. We don't have a regime where we have ongoing monitoring fees for years on end for activities on water. They're slightly different to those fixed land use monitoring charges.
Okay.
Yeah, just a question around the change to the moorings and jetties is huge, right? And it's because we're doing something new. So, and we're going up for consultation and we have to meet consultation requirements. Have we got a level of service change here that we should be consulting on options for?
It's an additional cost. I don't believe it's a level of service change. We're still providing the license, and that's the fundamental purpose. What we're doing is we're now enforcing and inspecting those licenses in a different way. So I don't see that's a change in the level of service. What it is actually executing our responsibility as the license provider and ensuring that license holders comply with that.
Okay. Just generally, I've got concerns about the consultation document. We've been talking about consultation documents recently, and we have to make sure that we give people options and that we explain things adequately. And I've just flicking through here, it's a big change to mooring and jettings, and we've got 5, 6, 7, 8 lines, not explaining where the costs lie, why there's such a big increase. It doesn't give the community much information to base its positions on, and therefore when the councillors receive communication from the submitters, you can't know that they've made an informed submission, because this is just so light. Your options are reduce fees, retain status quo, or increase in line, but we have to.
Question.
Oh, yeah, okay, it's a very good point. I'd like some comment around the adequacy of this document. Is it sufficient? Could we be doing better in providing more information to submitters so that councillors get better feedback?
Well done.
Thank you.
So let you answer it first.
This is a fee-setting document.
I guess the point is that this is a big deal for people when they have to pay this much more, for example, on the moorings or environmental charges. Some of the ones have gone up a lot. So I think we can look at it, and I think your answer sort of
Question.
well, I'm getting there. The answer sort of, because I'd like more, the answer sort of says fees are really not that big a deal. We don't really need to really flesh out the consultation much. We don't need to provide options, but I think we do.
Well, fees are designed to reflect the funding and finance policy that sets the policy direction. This is basically endeavouring to ensure that our policy and our fee charges remain consistent with our funding and finance policy.
But there are different ways to achieve it. So when you decide,
Hang on.
So you're debating.
I am debating with you. You're right. Okay, how do I frame it into a question? We have no option but to increase in line with our policy, and we're not considering the LTP at this time, so we can't change the policy. We literally just have to increase the fees, and what matters is how we do it. That's where that's the only place the options lie. So
Glading, I'm still waiting for a question. I'm pretty sure all the other councillors are as well.
Explaining the context. So there are no real options in this document, is what I'm coming to. Why are there no real options?
I think I've covered that.
Because it's fees.
It's a fee. It's designed to ensure that our fees remain consistent with our funding and finance policy. Councillor Wong earlier raised that we should be making sure that we make those adjustments more regularly. And I think it's in that sense, people have the ability to object to those, and people have in the past objected to those fee changes. So there is an opportunity for people to object to those, and they have to challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question regarding the proposed Wanaka Airport landing fees. Will these increases be enough to enable the airport to break even financially?
Yeah, through the chair, this is a good change. It on its own will not make the airport break even. We are working in other areas, including the lease fees, to get to that point. So it's not just the landing fees in isolation.
I'm just wanting to clarify something that maybe I haven't understood is, so the funding and financing policy has a target of the harbour master fee services being cost neutral to the ratepayer. So is that the full harbour master services? Like the monitoring and safety and everything, or is that just for the mooring and jetties?
So that's the cost of the entire service.
Okay,
And that is, yeah, and effectively in this council, we're,
Yeah.
I suppose we could argue fortunate that we have the shot over jet concession.
Yeah.
Which allows us effectively to, generally with that and with the mooring fees and other minor charges or fines, get very close to or break even so that we're not actually asking the ratepayer to make a direct contribution.
okay, yeah, it's just that I think that there is a bigger question, which is maybe to take offline, because it's maybe not directly related to fees, but recuperating costs for safety monitoring under our fees is probably the only way we can do it, but I see issues with the lack of power that our harbour masters have to actually enforce safety. So there's a huge cost associated with it, which is picked up by the fees of mooring and jetties.
To be fair, mooring and jetties only private beneficiaries pick up
Sorry,
a
and
relatively
the shop
small
over jet, yeah.
portion of that cost, that overall cost. I mean, in a similar way, you know, we use parking fees to regulate parking activity, but we also use some of that to enable us to support public transport. So there's a direct cost management, but there's also a wider benefit cost that sometimes apply to some of those activities.
It would be good to, outside of this document, just to understand the wider benefit costs of the money that's going to the harbour master service, please.
So I'm not quite sure what you're asking for.
Maybe I can, I don't think I need to.
Okay, well,
address
you
it
can
here.
you
I
can
can
follow
take
that
that
later.
offline.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be fine.
thank you.
Yeah, any further quick,
Thank you. Two questions from me. One quick one. Would we consider a increase in the non-QLDC rate paying wedding venue rate for the Lake Hayes Pavilion above the suggested level of increase? I did some market research, local provider of a wedding venue. I've circulated that information to elected members.
Your husband,
Not my husband, no, nothing to do with us. However, this operator has a comparative venue. They charge $8,000 to $10,000 venue hire for a marquee, toilets, table and chairs and a kitchen tent with no kitchen facilities provided in it. I'm fully in support of our community rates and our resident rates around the Lake Hayes Pavilion, but I still think we're coming in way too cheap on a non-QLDC ratepayer. I think we're looking at about $2,500 for a wedding hire for the pavilion. I'd suggest we should be looking over 3.5K on the research that I've done. My other question is, and you can answer that following the meeting, I don't really need an answer for that one here. My other question reflects our funding and financing policy around things like our community facilities, parks and reserves, and the increases there where we're looking to make some sort of contribution towards maintenance. My question is around commercial operators where a contract doesn't actually occur on our land, for example, a bike guided tour, a four-wheel drive operator, micro-mobility parking type of conversations. Is there a way we can investigate a mechanism to clip the ticket on those operators? Biking, for example, are really willing to make a contribution to us for use of our trails and tracks, but we just don't have any mechanism within our funding and finance to deliver that. So my question is, can we look to find a way to gain some revenue from those commercial channels in that way? And that also stretches to parking fees. I note that we only currently collect them within the Queenstown CBD that does operate to keep our 5,000 current car parks tuning over so that people come into the CBD? Is there anywhere else we could be charging for parking around the district?
Parking.
Chair, on the last one, the parking strategy, which is currently being reviewed, and individual parking areas will come back with proposals around that. That very matter about do we introduce more paid parking in various areas and how would we do that? So that'd be a central part of that. On the question of the commercial use of the tracks, we've had discussions with the Trails Trust a number of times now, trying to identify what the legal mechanism is that council could use to be able to oppose such a charge. And the proposal is that commercial operators might charge a fee per person that would then be used for track maintenance. We had those discussions, we've now find a legal means of doing that or an efficient way of collecting those through the council process. But we recognise that would be some benefit, but we haven't identified the ability yet. So we're still having those discussions.
But it is a challenge that's consistent with accessing things like reserves, the dock estate, areas where people can publicly come on and off. This council did at one stage have an agreement and arrangement with the rafting companies on the shot over because there was a contribution to the maintenance of the road, on the Skippers Road. That failed after a number of years, started out for voluntary payment. Stu may wish to comment on that, but it effectively died and there was no way to actually ultimately enforce it. We're happy to continue to look at those options, but they are difficult to achieve. In terms of the wedding venues, I actually go to wedding venues. I mean, one of the classic differences is between the exclusive use of the site versus the fact that people might have exclusive use of the pavilion. They don't have exclusive use of the pavilion. So people can actually be on that reserve and wander around that reserve if they chose. Most people are too polite to do so, whether it's for pure. Yeah, well, yeah, present company accepted. But you know, I think that when you start to raise costs to perhaps represent a more commercial level, then you do start to get into issues of exclusivity of use, and that's another challenging area. If people feel that they then are paying a lot, they want to be able to then keep everybody else out.
Thank you. I just think we often talk about every ratepayer here is driving a bus of 60 visitors with us through our lifetime here on average, and they're pushing us off our trails there. We don't have a mechanism around a visitor levy yet. Just really would like staff to keep the focus on how do we manage to get, I look at the Arrowtown Millennial Track, we're already not, people aren't using
Still
it.
doing questions.
What can you keep doing as a next step, please?
Well, Mr. Chair, we'll continue to explore those options. Also, our discussions with the Trails Trust here about whether they introduce some voluntary scheme with commercial operators who all seem willing, which they then think which would be administratively more efficient, and they can channel that back into track maintenance. But it'll be the same issues that I suppose the chief executive identified with other similar initiatives.
Thank you.
My question is specifically about environmental health, but I guess it actually can go across all boards, but what, as well as looking at increasing fees, what efficiencies were looked at to ensure we didn't need to increase fees where possible?
Yeah. So we looked at the whole spectrum, or the whole finance side of environmental health. So starting off with revenue and income, detailing how the audits are done on the timelines, what legislation requires of the audits to get it done. We then from there reviewed, so we got how many hours is required for an audit. We then went back and reviewed what's our staffing cost in order to produce a productive labour hours to get to that amount. That's on the cost side. So together with that, sort of the main component of environmental health costs lie in staffing and overhead allocation. So in that staffing cost, identifying exactly how much labour is attributed to that. That was tied down and made sure that it's calculated accurately. We then went on, had a look through the other costs that affect environmental health to make sure that we do not have any overestimations on costs going in there. And then we extended that and looked at the overhead allocation. So there's a number of cost allocations across council. So the first one is within the department, which in the regulatory department, looking across the department at how functions share the shared services, and then also how the rest of the council costs affect the regulatory department. So going through that, and then at the same time, looking at where we at with our revenue and financing policy, what's required to achieve that. And then, so that's on an internal basis. And from there, we extended that and looked externally at alternative providers, because council is not the only organisation providing the health audit services. And it's not just the food audits, it's a number of environmental health related services. Reviewed that against external parties that also provide that service to see if we're out of line or within scope. And some of it's quite difficult because you've got different sizes, economies of scale that's being looked at. But it was reviewed against the external providers as well. To then see, are we in line with where we are costing it? Yes, it's in a.
Now we finished. Were you in line with the other external commercial providers?
Yes, yeah, so one of the providers, we looked at Dunedin Council, but the thing is, it's a much bigger scale, and they have different implications of costs and things. But in order for someone to do, and I'm talking off the top of my head here, if the audit is done by someone else, you'll be paying the same more than council is.
Yeah. I think generally in terms of principle, I mean, obviously we have finance policy, and annually we review our costs, and obviously we try to ensure that we keep our costs as low as possible, thus effectively ensuring, as Petrie pointed out, that we do some comparative figures to make sure that we're not trying to avoid being an outlier. But if you look at look at all the costs in this cost schedule, there are multiple costs across a variety of things that we're trying to ensure that we're being fair in the allocation of those. So we're the better suppliers.
Yeah, next question. In the document itself, it doesn't really talk about the revenue and financing policy at all, and I think it would be useful for people to understand that the fees that are proposed aren't necessarily actually the full costs. Is there any way that we can include that into the document?
So there's a reference in that document to it, and it does refer to it, but we can spell that, we can do some additional text into that to basically.
I think that would be really useful for people to understand that even though these are the costs, that the actual true costs might actually be significantly more.
Yeah, and as we know, from the funding and finance policy, the public and private benefit split varies considerably across different activities.
I don't think that's very clear in this. I know that we understand that, but I just think in terms of an external perspective, and given that this usually sits possibly with their policy, given that it's going out separate, it'll be useful.
Yeah, draw some further attention to it.
Okay, any further questions? I think we should just tidy up the moorings and jetties fees. You've got three options, is it? Three options there.
Well, I think effectively we've got three options. We would recommend option one. So it's effectively whether, and the options 2 and 3 are very much dependent on the how frequent.
Options to which options?
Sorry. So the options I put in the memo that staff worked on was simply retaining an administrative fee only, so no increase. And that would basically transfer the current fee from an average of $250 to $330 per annum. Introducing a biannual inspection of the mooring that would increase that to $500 per annum, or an annual inspection of the mooring, which would be a fee of $660 per annum. As I pointed out, staff are open to either option, either the $500 fee or the $660 fee. We would not recommend an admin only fee.
I guess my point on that would be, great, there's options, but those options should be in the document.
That's what we're about to do. That's what I'm asking
So
the
not,
question.
not deciding which one we're putting in, but going, these are our options, these are the pros and cons, and getting feedback. Because otherwise we're deciding on the hoof based on nothing. The whole point of an SCP statement of proposal is to go out and where there are options, provide them.
Sorry, so we're not doing it on the basis of nothing, we're doing it on the basis of the information we've provided.
But when
and
you're asking us
secondly,
to decide,
statement of proposal does not go around giving options. It actually identifies if there are options, but it actually has a proposal.
yeah, but there are options. I guess I'm saying we can have a recommended option, but then we can say these are the other options. Because there are genuine options, and they would literally be the only options that are in the document. And we may say that some of the other fee increases are just, you know, inflationary, but this one isn't. And so instead of sitting here and deciding between the options now based on something that we saw at 12 o'clock today, if we were lucky, maybe we could agree to put the options in the document and set out the pros and cons, get feedback, and then we decide.
Councillors?
Just, I suppose, one way there's no new information, I mean, what we're trying to do is clarify the $800 fee, which has always been part of the consideration. We've re-looked at the numbers and suggested that it would be $660, which would then cover the costs once you refine that. So the recommendation would be the $660 for the continuation, some change from 800 down to $660 to reflect what we think of the actual costs. The only other option then would be whether you want to go for a biannual survey, which would be 500. And if you went for the 330, there would be no inspection or something we would not recommend. So it's new information, but it's finishing the existing information basis for those costs and trying to make sure that they're actually justified.
Do we
Hang on.
is there any guidance, I guess, or regulatory requirements, whether it should be biannual or annual?
It's entirely our choice. But I suppose what we should be doing is setting a regime that's consistent with what our intention is, which is, as we said, to check the mooring, check the locations remain the same, check there aren't additional moorings, or the moorings aren't being moved, making sure that the boats that are there are at the right scale and size for the mooring. And I think from the advice, you'll be surprised how often some of these things do change.
There's currently no inspection.
That's partly what we're trying to address. There's been no inspection, and I think that's the conversation we had with council last year, was actually as part of taking a more informed and more active role in management of the moorings, that we should undertake this additional function.
Can I just ask a question? So, and all of these options though, we're still going to put 40 grand back to ratepayers?
Yes, yes. Now, I mean, I think I might have said in the memo, you know, this is partly predicated on what we anticipate the income from the shot over concession to be. That does vary from year to year. We do get a predicted income from them. It's generally pretty good. So, I mean, really, in the context of the size of the income, the $40,000 we're dealing with is a somewhat de minimis number. But it will either if that fee is not achieved, then yes, it will become a cost on the rates.
Yeah, it's a reduction from the current 64,000. Currently, it says rates impact at $250 is 64,000.
I can clarify that. That's if we kept the fee at 250,000. It would $250. So $250 would be a $64,000 payment.
But actually wouldn't be recovering our administrative costs. And so there is a as we noted, the fee hasn't gone up since 2011. So that's an inflationary component to it. And there is, historically, there's been real problems with the lack of monitoring and checking of the mooring blocks and the jetties. And we've seen some examples in the last year or so to start to up our game on that. So there is a direct cost of undertaking those services, both in terms, and it is a cost of the mooring block owners, but they then do get the use of mooring blocks for whatever they use them for. So it's covering the costs, the administrative costs, and the cost of undertaking that regular checking of them to make sure that they comply and boats the same size, or they're not too big, or whatever else. And also the numbers, and also to check that there's suddenly not a whole lot of new mooring blocks that are popping up, because that's the other thing that can happen. You don't get oversight of that. So it's all of those things to go into the extra charge.
Oh, sorry. Just one other thing. So if it was an annual inspection, is there the capability to inspect all those moorings annually? Yes.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question as to whether an annual inspection provides any additional safety benefits from a technical perspective. Will a mooring degenerate over a period of 12 months, or is it more likely to be 2 years? You know, so what's the technical necessity for an annual mooring versus annual inspection versus a biannual one?
The biggest safety benefit is from the audit process that happens by doing the inspection, seeing that it hasn't moved or hasn't been relocated, or that the boat hasn't changed. That's the largest safety inspection. I do agree that there's low likelihood that the chain's going to significantly deteriorate within a year. I fully agree with that. But the broader benefits of inspecting that mooring is the reason you want to do it or not.
But but isn't one a structural inspection, and one's a very cursory inspection around what's on it? So the cost base would be different if you're achieving different things. But
so
anyway, I mean, I'll yeah, you're welcome to answer. Yeah.
I think you're getting down to a level of detail that the fee structure we can't answer. I mean, there is an average cost to this. This is an average cost of checking those each of the mooring blocks. It's not broken down to how much of it is assigned to for safety and how much of it is to the audit. There is a cost for a harbour master to go and visit all these. We've tried to estimate that. We can't provide you with the detail down to that level to justify whether it's 500 or 600 or 625.
And yeah, thank you. And with respect, you know, we're faced with trying to explain to these people why the increase is occurring in the magnitude that is. As I said, I acknowledge the direction of travel. If councillors choose to, my view is that a biannual inspection is sufficient, and that they can still monitor some of the other things just as they're going around. Equally, in my view, we still have duplication in that we have someone diving to check whether the moorings are safe and structurally sound, in addition to the visual inspection that's here, and that remains a duplicated cost for the mooring owners. As I said, I appreciate the work that's done, the director of travel. I still think we need to actually go back and work out what the problem is we're trying to solve. And equally, you know, as I've advocated for, there's a broader picture to this, is how we're recovering ramp fees, what contribution ramp fee charges could make to the harbour master services, the fact that we're not recovering any commercial permits for council structures and jetties, at least in Wanaka, as far as where we don't have any charges for large commercial vessels to be using council structures. So there's a broader picture here, and I think that without that information and without that detail, I can't.
You got a question?
In good conscience. Okay. Yeah, I suppose that, you know, is it worth taking a broader view of this whole cost recovery model for waterways and coming up with a more balanced number?
To share, it's quite possibly, but we can't do that overnight. There's a lot of complexities around it, and even the charging at ramp fees would require a level of sophistication in terms of being able to collect those fees at the boat ramp, do CCTV, checking on all that. Those would have to be worked through if there's a possibility of that. We can certainly check on the commercial fees and leases around Wanaka. We've done some work currently through the property team on current leases. These are costs associated with what we believe is a necessary inspection service, and these are, you know, significant assets for these individuals and potentially significant boats sitting on these assets. And for according to Harbourmaster, they at times break free. We have the cost associated with that. Historically, there has been no management of these, and that's caused us even more problems. And yes, there is a cost to the dive survey, but that's also the cost of having a mooring block in the lakes and making sure that they are safe. So that's the base. We've tried to provide the basis for these current fees for you. In terms of that inspection, there's a couple of options for you.
Any further questions? Any further questions? We're going to move this along.
I was just gonna ask how you're gonna move this along.
Okay. So I'm proposing one, no contents of report. So two, I think with two, we can adopt the user fees and charges draft statement of proposal for consultation, taking on board what Councillor White was saying with reference to the funding and finance policy, and inserting the annual or biannual option in the mooring and fees section.
You know, maybe at the end of that two, you go with the following changes. And
yeah, with the following, yeah,
following change will then pay mooring fees. So you can then make that decision if that helps.
So I think we still need to, as a council, have a actual proposed fee.
Yep.
Whether that's going to be the 660 or the 500.
And a little bit more information on the moorings and jetties would be good, because 7 lines for such a big change might be.
We can
we can put that in. So you've got to go out with a proposal. So is it an annual or biannual? What I just biannual. Okay, right. We don't need to vote. That can be put in there, and it'll go out for consultation, and it can change what the feedback we get. Oh, yes, true. Okay.
If we're sort of working up a bit of a change, I'm just wondering, to Quentin's point, just around a waterways review, given that we're here at the table.
But that's outside the scope. I'll just sort out the fees and charges. We can look at that outside of this. Yeah. No, outside of this meeting. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. So one, note the contents of this report. I'm going to rely on you here, Jane. Did you pick up that conversation?
Yeah. So we're adopting the draft statement proposal with the following changes. And so that is with the funding and finance policy and with the biennial moorings charge.
Yeah. Okay.
I think also that in the discussion around moorings, the options.
Yeah, with an expanded option. Or expanded option in the mooring and fees section.
Put in the explanation. So we can
Got one. And then 3, use the front bit, the hearings panel of 4 members. So I'm looking for 4 volunteers here. I'll be a bit picky. I know we've got a few very strong opinions, and I'll ask if they do not put their hands forward for it, just to maintain the public integrity of the hearings panel. So,
very strong.
Oh, was that a finger? So Gavin, Councillor Bartlett, thank you.
So it would be get together good cross representation of the entire district.
Yeah, if I can. So we've got a lot of Mississippi Ward sorted. I'm now looking.
Look at me.
Oh, thank you.
It's in May, isn't it?
I think they're pointing at me, having just come from Manawa, so.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So that's 3. We need a little backup.
I can do it. I don't have, I have a strong concern about the process, not so much about the outcome. So if you want to use me, you can. But you don't have to.
Want to use just on a panel if you want. So councillor Clare. Brilliant, thank you, councillors. Do you want me to read out to again, just? No, look, you're all very excited about it, okay. So number 3, appoint a hearings panel of 4 members, councillors Gavin, Cody, Lisa and Nikki. Of which 3 are required to form a hearings panel to hear submissions. I'll move those 3. Do I have a second? Thank you, Barry. All those in, sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Just for in the future, this is a consultation document and, you know, we're going to get feedback, but I just wanted to point out that the user fees contributed, this is in the report, 50 million to council in the financial year 22-23. That's 29% of total revenue. It is a big deal, and I do think we should take it seriously, and it would be nice to have things a bit more fleshed out about what we've done to try and reduce fees. It could have been a better document, I guess. So next time, hopefully.
Thank you, and just to, I suppose, signal with it, there are many of these that are just inflationary adjustments, and there is a risk of, dare I say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I just wanted to make that point. There are a lot that are legitimate, I think.
I think that I already sent a message around saying that I didn't feel comfortable with the environmental health of these, so as I'm just indicating that I won't be voting for it.
Thank you. Right, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? 2, okay, you find.
Can I have a recording?
And 1. Yeah. Okay. Motion carried. Thank you, councillors. Team. See if we can get through policies, then we'll have a break. How about it? Item 3, page 66 of your papers. Councillors. Carrie, Cheryl. Take it away.
This paper represents quite a significant piece of work for the policy team, which has been ongoing for a while. I think that it is a relatively legacy piece of work to devote policies that span back well over 30 years. So some of our staff are actually born after we did policies for the first time. It does speak to the need for discipline ongoing, which we are applying as an organisation to revoke as new policies come on board. Carrie, do you have anything to add?
I'm happy to take the floor as read. Would really like not to get into discussion of 1997 policies, which was really turn it over to councillors for questions.
I was going to see the Meetings Council.
Yeah,
1990.
1990.
Very good question. Are we going to do the same thing with strategy?
Through you, your worship, there's actually not as many strategies to get our heads around as policies, so that's a relatively straightforward exercise that I'd say we're probably fairly on top of.
Okay, just looking at some old growth policies and things like that, and I was just like, I think it's still relevant. Everything that was sort of done before, climate and biodiversity and all of those things, like, you know, do we cross check and make sure that there's not parts of them that's, anyway, there was a question.
There are several that actually, and when the next one's been adopted, it addresses the need to progress on from where it is, but whether or not it's been formally revoked, I think we'll have a look.
Thank you. And look, I appreciate that many of these are trivial in nature, but I suppose my concern is that in the report, I don't understand whether the ones that aren't trivial have had a replacement, have been replaced by something new or something more meaningful. I don't know, what the best example of that is, but you know, there's certainly some that, sorry. Well, yeah, let's take that for an example. Elderly housing, obviously we've changed direction on that, and what we're going to do with the housing trust and things like that is, have we got a policy regarding aged housing now?
Yeah, that's been replaced by the home strategy 2021.
There was a separate document that listed everything.
That listed the.
That listed what everything was replaced with.
Catchment A. Yeah.
Okay, keep going on.
Since we're in questions, what was the most interesting one that we did? Or entertaining? There's, there is one.
It has to be the genetic engineering one.
Just a couple of administrative things, but one of them near the top, the replanting of trees, particularly the replacement of poplars and other trees on rural roads joint, it's a separate bullet point, the trees on rural roads part, it's part of the same title though, isn't it? It's a long one that went on to 2 lines, got 2 bullet points on it.
We'll delete a bullet point.
Yeah. But there were also 2 missing off the list that was in the attachment or the appendix. Attachment. There was application of tender policy to associated organisations 2004 was missing out of the agenda. And project initiation approval process 2006 was also on the attachment, but not on this list. They're still in there, aren't they?
So your worship, so you're saying that the link didn't lead you to the old.
The
policy?
attachment, the document had a list of all these policies, but those 2 weren't. They were on that attachment, but they're not on this list on the resolution.
Eagle eye.
Is that-
Happy
what was the-
to correct
sorry.
that for the minutes that go out, that shouldn't,
That's right.
they should all be in there as a complete.
I'll just make a note of that when I do the solution. But so there was project initiation approval process. I spotted that one. What was your first one?
The other one was application of tender policy to associated organisations.
Oh, there we go, 2004.
Just above Crown Range Road. And the damages, street frontages, the date on that is 2006, but I think it's 1993 in that document.
Given if anything.
What time did you get back tonight?
I didn't go to.
Computers don't go to bed.
We'll go through and double check all of the
Yeah.
dates.
Okay, thank
to
you.
include everything from the attachment.
Well, then the only other one then was. You're gonna do that.
Okay, you just been silly.
There was one that has a reference to the RMA. And so on the title on the document, it's got RMA 1991, and then the date of the document is 2002. But on this list, 1991 is not there, but it's not really significant.
That under planning and development, you're talking about the policy on request for confidentiality. Under the Resource Management Act 1991, that's the name of the act.
That's the name of the act and then the date of the document. So the 1991 is missing out of the list here, but it's not really.
Oh, right, okay, gotcha.
Wasn't really too worried about it.
What a challenge, it's got a nail.
The RMA 1991, comma.
Exactly.
Okay, right.
Quick question. So given that you just acknowledged that maybe we need to do it more regularly, do you think we can just do that as business as usual? Or do you think we should actually write it into the resolution that we do review the archiving more regularly?
Through your worship, the intent is that whenever a new policy is reviewed, and it needs to come to council, is that the revocation of the old occurs at that time.
Okay.
And so this is merely a housekeeping exercise when that hasn't occurred.
Okay,
All good.
thank you.
One would like to move? Thank you, Nikki. Second, thank you, Esther. We need discussion.
Thank you very much.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried unanimously.
Thank you for all your work. on
Thank you.
it.
Yes.
Karen.
Sorry.
Probably thanks in the second hour and a half.
We'll push on MOE submission, item 4, page 72 of your papers. Hey, Luke.
Good afternoon, councillors. So paper in front of you requests the restrictive approval of submission to the Ministry of Environment on the Transitional National Planning Framework. It's a requirement that's now been repealed under the National Environment Act. Unfortunately, the act was repealed after council lodged its submission. However, just a bit of new information is that we understand the government's new phased approach to the RMA reform will involve what's called an integrated national direction package. So all is not lost, and we understand from MFE that information will be useful in the next steps and for us in the next steps too.
Questions?
One quick question. Why did we recommended a regional approach to greenhouse gas emissions rather than a national or I don't know, why a regional approach?
Why not district?
Or what, I mean, is that come out of one of our climate strategy, or has it come out of guidance from the RPS, or what's the reason we've taken to a regional approach to greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes, that bit of advice came from our climate and resilience team, specifically, but I recall there being just a greater level of data at a regional scale that would be beneficial for application and the approach there. So I can't answer specifically.
I wonder whether it's because of the regional land transport work or something, but anyway, interesting.
It may also have to do with the regional outcome work as well, so it's just, it's a more integrated approach. And it does allow for, I suppose, districts to have some unique characteristics which can then be addressed at the better addressed at the regional level.
And I think, if I remember rightly, the SPA had a regional outcomes of inflation lending at a regional level as well.
And I would note that it's good that we've drawn the attention to our landscapes. They're a very important thing to us because they potentially could be watered down under the changes.
And just also, just a thank you to the outdoor agricultural heritage section, excellent, and the risk-based approach to natural hazards, really appreciated up the road. So thank you.
Okay, do we have a mover? Thank you, Matt. Seconder. Thank you, Cody. No discussion. All those in favour? Aye. Pass unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, chatting.
Kiwi bird life. Item 5, page 88, your agenda.
Good afternoon again. It's to be the table to talk about leases. We have in front of us the Kiwi Birdlife Park lease. The request and extension. The extension that's proposed is for 15 years. That would be the initial first extension of 5 years with 2 rights, 5 years following that. So I think the paper is read, but when I was reading through it again myself, I noted that it didn't specifically put the end date. So I think it is 15 years from 2032. So 2047 would be the end date.
So 2047.
47.
Thank you.
You've got the need sequence.
Questions, councillors?
Have we ever thought about any other uses for that site that we need to be aware of, given that we're extending a long lease, or are we very happy with the offering that's there at the moment?
We haven't gone to the market seeking alternative uses. This is extension based on this the degree which we're happy with the current use and the willingness to pay the market rate.
Thank you.
Lisa, no, go Esther.
Thank you. Yeah, it's probably a little bit deep dive on the same question. It's 15 hectares of CBD site, and we're talking about 7.5% this receipts and things. Is the rental suggested at market rate for that sizable piece of land? Looking at the link that we made with this, I'm cautious around exploring other options and whether we're actually delivering at a market rate of return. While there's really honourable intent behind the current operation of it, I'm cautious that we can be pulled in and use this very cautiously to say a greenwashing of use through it being a conservation project with sanctuary and all those sorts of bits. It's easy to get pulled into the niceness of this without actually looking at the viable return on the property, and also whether other operators may be more willing to pay a higher contribution to deliver either different outcomes or the same outcomes.
Sorry, just before the colleague Quentin asked that, Matt, are you stepping back from this item?
I'm abstaining, but
Are you?
happy to sit in the room. Bless
Yeah,
you.
but if you are going to basically declare a conflict, you should sit back from the table.
How far back would you like to go?
Just far enough back so it's not seen that you are influencing the debate. It's just a matter of, just a matter. You can just put on the bleachers.
Crouch behind.
If it was public excluded, we'd require you to leave the room.
Well, welcome you back.
Sorry, I mean, to disturb the flow of questions, but just to make sure that would be.
Yeah, so, the 7.5% is in line with our community facility funding policy and the direction we're trying to keep with the leases, of our facilities within Queenstown. I have no doubt that if we converted the whole bunch into commercial real estate and put in high-rise buildings, we'd get more than that. So that's, if the council wanted to direct us to do that, we'd have a separate conversation, right? This is a space that has high value to us and has operated well. And we have, we've sought to provide a lease that is aligned with our current funding policy.
So on paragraph 9, page 91, it mentions the reserve management plan, which is currently under review for Ben Lomond and Queenstown Hill. And that the Parks team are proposing that the land be subject to the RMP. So it does state that it should pose no concerns, I guess. Just kind of thinking that we're wrapping ourselves into this till 2047, which seems like a very long time. So my question is really around why 15 years, like I recognise that's a kind of norm in kind of commercial leases, but yeah, can you speak to that with regard to the RMP as well?
So we expect this process that any outcomes of the RMP would flow through to the lease that would require that. However, the term of the lease is quite as a norm, gives certainty to the business to operate for a significant amount of time. Shorter leases don't work well for this type of business.
And so with regards to the RMP, what can you just speak very briefly, very high level, to what that would look like in relation to the actual Kew Birdlife Park being part of that, being subject to the RMP? What does that mean for them and for our community?
So, I can't guess the outcome of the RMP, but there will be a reserve management plan in place in the future, and we'll take into consideration the activities on site. We will do the consultation.
Okay.
Possibly the outcome of the RMP is less likely to enable and for support converting that to large scale commercial sites.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to the particular mix that the Kiwi Birdlife Park offers, which is a mixture, as I think Councillor Guy outlined, of it needs to make it's commercial, but it also has a really strong social and community component. And the council, when it negotiated the last rent rise with the Kiwi Birdlife, went through a long process with them around understanding and evaluating the sort of the broader fact that they were effectively a community use, even though they're an operating business within that context. So this lease continues to support that. A quite peculiar mix, I think, well, quite a unique mix in the Queenstown context. And some of the councillors who have been here for a while may recall the conversations that were had around the important, I suppose, offering that the Kiwi Birdlife actually provides on Brecon Street, quite a unique offering, both in the Queenstown market and in New Zealand generally. So, I mean, I think the lease, the value of the lease actually reflects the fairly unique circumstances that exist with Kiwi Birdlife. I don't know, Councillor Furley, to comment.
Question, but I could slip my note to my councillor on my left, perhaps ask it, but yeah, are they looking to invest? Why do they need so long?
They have been investing for some time.
Just put it into context, though, how long have they been on that site?
First of July 1997 was when the lease first commenced.
Were they on the site before that?
Passed.
Is it normal to be extending it now, like if it's not even up till 32, like is this early to be looking at renewing it? It just seems like a really long way away to renew it to, and that the current one is actually expiring to be making the decision for that.
It could be considered a touch early, but this, it's within the last term, so you'd want to give the business certainty, well before the end of that lease. So it's, they wouldn't want to be in a position with a year to go, be uncertain of a possible extension.
No, I know, but it's not really a year, it's like 6 years.
Yes, but it's still within it's still a reasonable timeframe to be looking at an extension.
Okay, any further questions? That's the proposed resolutions in favour. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Ferg. Seconded, Nikki. Discussion?
I'd just like to say that it's not all about money. Start, we've got lots of important things about this place. I mean, one of the things it does is it catches stormwater. You know, we've got a big hill, it's got patches of biodiversity that you just can't replicate anywhere else. It meets so many of our other objectives. I can't imagine ever turning it down. I think it's a really, really valuable thing to have in the town and really unique. And yeah, good on them for wanting to invest and carry on.
Just a comment as well. I don't think that there's anyone suggesting that it's not valuable. And I think it's recognised highly in the community that it is incredibly valuable, and also that the directors of the business are brilliant custodians of that land, and that there's a lot of native replantation going on, etc. So yeah, just acknowledging that as well.
Brilliant. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? None. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Do you want to have a break? Item 6, page 127. Raw energy easements.
All this is an interesting.
Okay. Take it away.
I'll take this as free.
Yeah, you can do
Look, this is for an easement to the marina to provide electricity to the marina. The easement doesn't exist, it goes across council reserve.
Okay, questions?
Quick question, and it may not come under the actual running of the lease, but isn't the site quite susceptible to flooding for a transformer to be sitting in? And is there any alternative site? Is their problem not ours? Where the person will be fast.
It's susceptible to flooding.
Okay. I think that's probably beyond our ability to comment on that. Aurora, we know how to deal with, so I think they have to isolate the transformers appropriately. We hope.
They have raised the ground on which they're putting it on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. What's the building it's going next to?
There's a small actually not in that building, but there's a small.
And the buildings in front of it? Do you know what they are?
Yeah, there's the floating commercial buildings on the water, those ones.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
So I looked on Google Maps and it looked like, and obviously this isn't current, but it looked like the building that it was next to had something in that position, which I know what it was, couldn't tell. But I'd be interested to see the thing for me, no question. Why do you think that putting something 12 metres squared onto a reserve that makes noise will not have a permanent effect on the reserve? Because we don't have to console if it's not permanent. And we've been around this over the last term as well, talking about what's permanent and what's not. But we're talking about not going up for consultation. But a transformer makes a lot of noise. It's right next to a building. It's next to a couple of other things. I'm not sure, I should have been down there. And it's 12 metres squared. And it's high. So it's it's a permanent alteration, therefore it requires, just technically, legally, it requires consultation.
We've been extensive, obviously handed that over to the Frankton Marina Company in order to manage, you know, at a wholesale basis. I mean, they've put in, you know, it's no longer, it's effectively leased, is it leased?
It's leased.
At least to the marina company on a commercial basis.
But the transformer doesn't make noise.
Finished. Oh, I just Googled and I remember talking about it in another item at one point in time around transformer. So one, I'd like to clarify whether it makes noise or not, and whether we've looked at that and asked some questions. So that would be my first thing. If we haven't asked questions, then there's a potential noise component. They buzz. But then the other point is you're asking us to agree it without consultation when the Reserve Acts requires it unless there is no permanent alteration to the easement. And usually we agree, we don't go for notification when it's underground. They dig it up and they put it back, but it's temporary. But this is permanent, above ground, 12 metres square. So I think it technically it requires being notified, and it's not something I'm saying you need to on the basis of the quality of the thing necessarily, but it's a technical point that the Act requires as a material permanent alteration.
So I think the report notes that this will be beside existing buildings. The report's based on it's not been significant change and the noise isn't been significant, if it doesn't need to be notified. That's the basis of this proposal. We may have a different view, but that's.
Well, let's go to the Act and see exactly what it says, because
No,
I think it's.
no, it's not. There's an interpretation in here. This is a proposed for a transformer adjacent to commercial buildings to provide services to the marina that's being under control of the marina company.
Yeah. It's any assistance. I'm going to move this, like we need to actually finish this meeting today. So I'm moving it.
Okay, do a second. Jeez, yeah. That was Barry. Seconding it there. Discussion.
Oh, look, I think it's
Okay.
really important that we meet our requirements under various acts, whether we think the merits of it are sufficient to not go out for consultation, or whether we think the technicalities of who's owns the land or whatever. And at the end of the day, this thing is a permanent alteration to the reserve. And we're not sure about whether it makes a noise or not. And it's right next to a building. So I'm happy to go through that, but I'd like to take it by division because I can't approve it to go ahead without consultation.
Can I just ask a question? I know we've just.
No, we can have this discussion.
Really quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll discuss it. So my thinking is that if it wasn't here, it would be somewhere else, right?
Yes.
But they could put it in the road reception.
So what I'm trying to ascertain, I guess, bearing in mind that it's got to go somewhere, is where else would it go anyway? And
I
with
think
that,
with the situation we're in, we have a transformer, as Councillor Smith.
Yeah.
That is actually being put in place to service the marina.
Yeah.
With the agreement of the marina leaseholder.
I get that. I was just
In part
saying,
to
I was saying
electrify the boat fleet as part of their thing, but anyway. I think we're in major weeds here, and you know, this could happen in a road reserve.
Hang on.
Any
Calm
part
down,
of the
Gus.
weeds.
Calm down, Gus. Right, we've got a mover, we've got a seconder, you'd like it in parts.
Well, just 2 and 3 separately.
Okay, so we'll do 1, 4, 5. Hang on.
Yeah, it's more fun.
I'm surprised. So 1, 4, 5, all that 6 and 7. All those in favour?
Aye.
Oh, I can't hear you out, sorry.
And then 2 and 3, all those in favour? So they're both of those occasions, we're 11-1.
So I'm against for both sides, falsely divided.
Motion carried.
Could you note my objection? Thanks.
C report, item 7, page 138 of our papers.
I would just point out procedurally that isn't division. Division is when you vote, each person votes into.
Yeah, that's why I said
That is
parts.
dividing
Hang on.
recommendations.
That's why I said
Yeah, I know. But just that was asked for division, that wasn't division. So.
One of the laws.
You, Chief Executive.
Thanks, Mr. Yeah, so you'll see basically, there are 8 items here in this report. or effectively 7. So the first one really relates to delegated the procurement of insurance brokerage. So we go out to require, we use brokers to assess our insurance. Mr. Burns is online and can speak to that in detail if we need to. Effectively, while the cost of that is not particularly high, obviously the value of the insurance that actually we procure becomes quite high. So we're seeking delegation to go out and approve the procurement plan, and then we'll go for a public tender for our insurance services, and obviously based on the value of that coming back, that will need to be referred to council for approval. So that's what we're seeking there. Second one is basically approving a rates remission application for the One Community House. So again, we allow for that to be approved by the chair of the Community Services Committee, which is Councillor Ferguson, and the financial controller. And then basically that has to be reported. So that's an action that we're simply reporting through. That's action that's been undertaken by Councillor Ferguson under other delegation. The third topic is my request for approval to travel. So any travel overseas by me is required to be approved by council, and that's to attend a study tour being run by Infrastructure New Zealand in the United Kingdom over in June, and that's specifically looking at models for city deals, but also for water entities. So that's a request for council approval for that. And then you'll see the committee recommendations. There's a recommendation from the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee specifically regarding the adoption of the fraud policy and the adoption of the tree policy. And that was consulted on, or that was consulted on and basically presented to be able to include up to the community board and then to the Community and Services Committee, and it requires to be adopted by the council. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, councillors?
Thanks. Just one on the insurance thing. Just that the report said that staff have developed a plan already, but that we're delegating to approve the plan. I'm just wondering why we didn't have an attachment, like why have we not seen the plan yet?
Well, because I think we're simply asking you to delegate that to me to approve it.
So I'm just interested because the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, I don't think the plan was developed in time for the AFRC to have a look at that. And then, sorry, it's just delegation without any sort of oversight.
Well, it's the delegation for the procurement to go out and procure and to go to market.
Yeah, and does it have it, sorry, and you may have mentioned this before, but does it have a figure, is there a figure attached to that
well,
we should be aware of?
The cost is not actually in the true cost is not in the procurement process. The true cost is in what comes back by way of an offer of service for insurance, which will, in our view, given that our insurance costs are around 12 million, require council approval before it can be signed off.
Okay, pending more on it afterwards. Could you just explain a little bit more about city deals? Because we hear a lot about city deals, but they're more of a word than a tangible thing. I think it'd be good for the community and everyone to understand what they might entail.
Well, I have briefed council previously on city deals, but effectively these have been identified by the government as a principal investment tool the government's investigating fundamentally to support the strategic investment of infrastructure to support development in New Zealand. City deals are a model that were basically pioneered in the UK, and the Greater Manchester City Council is the preeminent operator, but they've been the most successful user of city deals. And city deals have a variety of different, I suppose, versions of them. Some of them are largely they are effectively either investment by the government against agreed targets for development, or they're co-investment by the government alongside local government. In the Manchester model, they also are part of the devolution process of powers from central government to the local government. So they're a very important concept. They're the model that the new incoming government has signalled as the way they want to have a relationship with local government, and particularly looking at where they might structure their investment. City Deals governments has commissioned work from a number of agencies, including MB, DIA, Ministry for the Environment, the New Zealand Infrastructure Committee, on providing advice on how it should look at city deals and how it should actually administer and form city deals. So there isn't at this point any particular clarity about that, but the whole model is around providing a pathway for shared central and local government investment into key infrastructure, and ultimately broader community and society outcomes. How exactly this government will choose to take that policy pathway is at this point unknown.
I guess I'm intrigued about the resistance of central to invest in infrastructure.
What's this relating to, sorry?
To the agreement of going overseas.
To go overseas, okay, so you're delving.
Sorry, I know it's late, I'm just interested in understanding.
I just say, if you want a briefing from the chief executive on his upcoming trip, I would suggest we do that offline rather than in today's meeting.
So whether this is about, whether there's a private investment component, because obviously the central government has been resistant to using its balance sheet to invest in Three Waters and is going down the local water down well. Presumably we're going over here, look at something.
Point of order, we are way down a rabbit hole that is outside the scope of what we're talking about today. We're talking about the scope of Three Waters and city deals.
Hang on, what you're saying, could you please be concise with your question, and I'll allow it.
Yeah, it's getting to the gist of.
And hang on, just a question: who, what, why, when, how?
What do you hope to gain from going? What do we hope to happen from having there? I guess, look, it doesn't. This is, if I could put some more context around it, would help, because basically my question is around, if the central government isn't investing, are we going over?
Councillor Glenning, please.
This is no longer than any
question, please.
It's not on point. It's not on point.
Radio.
It's not on point.
Okay.
So we answer the question, what we hope to
hear. What you hope to hear.
So I think there's a number of things that I would like to get out of it. I think it would grow my understanding of the scope that City Deals could offer us. I think it's also going to be beneficial to be travelling with a number of key decision makers from central government and possibly from industry. And I think my previous experience when I've gone on these types of exchanges is that that's often a very key outcome that's achieved. I think actually it will continue to be an opportunity for us to make sure that QLDC is at the forefront of people's minds when they're thinking about those areas that actually would benefit from some co-investment by central government.
I have a quick question. This is not personal, but when we were asked as councillors whether to fund you going, I said no, but I said it would be really good to send a proxy. My view is that it would be really good, I think, to enable other executive leadership to have this knowledge and bring it back, and to keep you here as the CE for that month, so that we've got you doing your CE role. Can you just speak to, is there
Sorry, I'm not away for a month.
Oh, sorry.
I'm away for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
If it was a proxy, I wouldn't need your approval, because I have the delegation to send staff overseas.
But I guess
So I think, sorry.
So the question is, does it need to be you, or is there greater learning from leading other people in our community?
I think one of the things
is in our organisation.
If you look at the sort of the terms of reference offering, what they were looking for were a lot of people could benefit from attending some of these, but they were also looking for people who actually already have a degree of, I suppose, knowledge, seniority, ability to influence policymakers. Now, I might be speaking out of turn. I don't want to be blowing my own trumpet, but I think I've got an effective relationship and the ability to speak quite authoritatively from a New Zealand context on the effects of spatial planning, the need for growth, and to be able to convey that to other senior people on the trip.
Okay, well, that's a great explanation, because what I first didn't, I guess, value is, I was thinking more about what you got from it, but what you're saying is what others.
Well, I think it'll go, it has to be both ways.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I don't want to labour the point, but would you consider the arterials the closest thing we've seen to City Deal in this district?
If you looked at the full model of City Deals, then the arterials will be a fairly poor example. The City Deal model at its core is much more around shared outcomes and shared investment over a long-term period. Okay. Yeah. So there is always a risk. So that it gets sort of boiled down to this project, that project. But one of the things that I've been a big advocate of is actually not doing it on a project by project basis, for the reasons that actually the benefits actually need to be more wider than an individual piece of kit.
Just touch on it. So the focus for any city deal for us would be on outcomes.
Right.
It's not a laundry list of projects.
Yeah.
It's outcomes. It's shared outcomes between central and local.
That's actually quite reassuring to hear. So, appreciate it.
Okay.
If you like me to go away.
Quick question I've been asked.
I want you to stay here.
Come on.
A quick question I've been asked to raise by the Arrowtown community in regards to the tree policy. And I have given them a sort of temporary answer on this, so I'm self-checking that as well. How does the tree policy affect character trees outlined in the Arrowtown historic management zone? And my response to that, from what came to us through the draft of the tree policy on the Community Services Committee, was that there was indication that there would be space for local tree strategies to be developed, and that would include looking at succession planning and also that mix of character trees and protected trees across district wide. So my question, am I correct in advising the Arrowtown community that the tree policy would still allow for local tree strategies to reflect independent character of some of our wards?
Oh, Jenny?
Yes.
Jenny, no. Thank you. Thank you. No, are you happy? No, do you want to expand? Yeah, expand. Sorry, I was playing. Yeah, go for it.
Well, effectively, the tree policy is about managing our existing tree stock, day-to-day rules. Yes, tree strategies for succession plans are a separate tool that will be required. And whether it's district-wide or individual, we'll get to that.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Just on that tree policy, is there still scope for minor amendments, or is it?
It's a recommendation from the community. The services committee.
I just wondered whether the objectives 2 and 3 didn't have like a verby type word at the beginning of them to actually do something like ensure appropriate trees planted in appropriate location. But what I really want to know was 1.7 on the next page talks about requiring a license to occupy. How is that activity actually managed in terms, because license to occupy is an issue to a person? What happens when that person dies? Who maintains the tree they planted? And how long does it operate for? Does that need to be expanded on in the policy?
Ms. Mayor, typically we would only issue license to occupiers for the period of establishment. So it wouldn't be indefinite. It depends obviously on the nature of planting, whether it was a planting area versus, we want to chop down this tree and plant 2 trees. So once those trees are established, we'd assume they just come back into council.
And the other one is about encroachment of trees that are planted on private property onto public land. How is that covered in this? Or another one, maybe.
So where the tree itself is on private land and the roots, for example, might go into public land or vice versa.
Or
I'm talking more the foliage on top, that might be obstructing a footpath or some other thing. Or if it's in private land, it's when.
Yeah, our policy doesn't apply to the private land, but I think there's other legislation that allows you to prune trees that's overhanging.
And all the pruning's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
No further questions?
Can we take these separately?
You
And I
do?
do have just
Right.
for shadow an amendment.
Right. So I'll move 1 through to 8. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Darren. Open up for discussion.
Got a
You go.
second. So, yeah, so I just wanted to raise the issue around the fraud definition, and I don't know whether it's possible to get it on screen.
It's in our piece.
So not the amendment, but the definition, just because it's important.
It's in your papers.
Yeah, it is in the papers.
The amendment is referring.
So it's on page, if it's not on screen, it's on page 145. It's coming. Oh, this is the amendment, so that maybe leave the amendment there and just, if on your papers, it's page 145. So, this is, the fraud policy is a significant revision, and for the first
Hang
time.
on, hang on.
Oh.
Sorry, you
yeah,
can't
it's a
talk
good-
to it.
No, you're
Put-
right.
Put it.
You're right. Okay, that's fine. So I'm gonna put what's on the screen.
Do you want to just,
So
can
it's-
you move the visuals?
So what we've got is a definition of fraud, I'll just explain it, and this is intended to sit within.
Hang on, are you moving the amendment?
Yeah, but I need to explain.
No, no, are you, everyone can read at this table.
Yeah, but I need a seconder.
Yes,
so
I know, but you can't talk to it until you have a
I'm not
seconder.
talking to it, I'm explaining the.
You can't even explain it until you've got a seconder. So are
Okay.
you putting the motion for an amendment?
The amendment, is that the definition of fraud in section 3 of the policy adds the disclosure of confidential information by elected members will be considered fraud when it is an intentional act involving the use of deception to obtain unjust or illegal advantage, including where the release constitutes deception, corruption, misrepresentation, or omission committed with the intention of gaining an unjust or illegal financial advantage or to cause an unjust or illegal loss or disadvantage. The Code of Conduct for elected members provides obligations regarding the disclosure of confidential information by elected members where that disclosure is not an intentional act involving the use of deception to obtain unjust or illegal advantage. This was worded for me by staff.
Okay, so
sorry.
we've got to move over. Do we have a second?
It was,
It was worded for me by staff.
it was, yeah, so I just want to be clear, so just make it clear.
I'm not saying staff support it.
No, that's right.
I'm saying it was worded for me by staff because it's quite long and convoluted.
Okay, the motion is put. Do we have a
Do we have a
second?
seconder?
I'll second it. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll discuss it.
So the reason for this fraud policy is new. I'll try to be really brief. And it's the first time elected members have been included. Right, and it's been considered by the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, but we don't have a full report on it here. So we're taking the decision of the AFRC via the Chief Exec's report, obviously. So when we had the discussion at the AFRC, this came up obviously because I was concerned about it. My concern is that we have a good definition of fraud at the top in the paragraph, that's fine. And then we have this list of fraudulent behaviours underneath, and which is not limiting. One of those is disclosure by elected members to third parties. And then the key bit is the second bullet point at the bottom, which says any of the above behaviours for personal gratification and or edification, whether or not there is pecuniary gain, which then is the bit that causes the controversy over whether elected members disclosing confidential information, which isn't defined, but disclosing confidential information to a third party, which would include the media, that puts it squarely in the definition of fraud. But there was debate around whether that interpretation is correct. So my interpretation is that all of these sit within the box that says definition, and so the whole thing is the definition of fraud. Bill Moran disagreed with me. Stuart McLaughlin disagreed with me. He thought that, they thought that it didn't capture elected members.
Hang on, you can't speak on behalf of other people that aren't here.
Well, hang on, we're taking the. and
No,
it's-
the only thing from an audit, finance and risk is there is a vote of how many? 6, 7 to 1.
There was a discussion. and
Yeah, I
none of
understand that, but
was
hang on,
Captured by.
councillor,
I can speak.
councillor, you cannot speak on behalf of people that are not here. So you can still talk to this here, but you cannot speak on people.
I will
and their
not
views
name,
on
I
here.
will not name anybody. So 2 members of the AFRC didn't feel that the definition of fraud captured elected members releasing to the media. They thought that the paragraph above overrode the behaviours underneath, and so that disclosure by elected members could be fraud, but not necessarily. Another member of the AFRC agreed with me that the inclusion of any of the above for personal gratification and or edification, whether or not there is pecuniary gain, cut against the definition of fraud, and that fraud is clearly defined that policy. There has to be deception, corruption, misrepresentation, and merely disclosing something confidential to the media isn't fraud. And so my concern is that there is this risk with this confusion around the definition that releasing anything to the media, whether intentionally or not, could be classed as fraud. And that was the discussion we had on the day, and there was confusion. So this amendment is clunky, but it's designed to ensure that there's an exception so that where an elected member discloses, and I'm not saying it's right, and no one is, but it's not dealt with as fraud, it's dealt with under the code of conduct, under the maintaining confidentiality rules. So that's the intention. It's literally to clear up confusion, because there were members of the AFRC who thought it was captured, and there were members that didn't. The chief executive, can I speak to that? What you said on the day, Mike, or are you? You thought it was captured, you thought it should be captured, is my understanding. Yeah, you thought that any release.
But I
of
also
information
have
to-
advised you separately that you need to, the application of any policy and any definition is always contextualised in the way that any of those other examples could be read in extremis. But equally, you would always apply the policy with a level of understanding about the nature of the extent of the intent. So,
yeah.
So
But can I finish? Sorry,
perhaps I could finish.
Well, I was just I was asking you if I could speak to what you said, and then you started talking. I hadn't actually finished what I was saying.
Well, perhaps I've now said what you might have said on my behalf, because I've now stated what my position is and how I'll continue to maintain and clarify that position.
So the concern is, should we be pulling something forward, something that isn't actually fraud, and should we be allowing that risk of being accused of fraud to hang over us? Or should we be dealing with it as it's dealt with currently in the code of conduct under the maintaining confidentiality clauses? I've forwarded this to everybody. I don't know if anyone's had time to read it all. Anyway, that's I can finish up afterwards. That's the start. If you've got any questions, let me know.
As a member of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, when it was discussed, my personal opinion was that this was, Nick's right, and it was the first time this has been brought in to include elected members, but not just elected members, volunteers as well. And my personal opinion is that we should all be held to the same standard, whether we're staff, elected members, or volunteers around fraud. And my point was that bar at the beginning is so high to cross, because you must be using deception to obtain unjust or illegal advantage. And it's not, you've already got to be doing that. There's also the every organisation must have the ability to protect confidential information. And we already have processes to challenge information. Yes, some of those do not necessarily meet our personal desire for timeliness. However, there's reasons for those to exist. And the rationale I shared on the day was, if we were waiting for a coroner's report outcome, there could be a couple of years between those questions being answered. And it is a very high bar to commit fraud. But I just feel that you have to leap that first hurdle, and that the unjust or illegal advantage is not just around pecuniary or financial advantage. If we want to just look from an elected member perspective, this could be when an individual is campaigning, it could be around any other form of advantage of one of us over a member of the public. So there was a lot of robust discussion on the day with the AFRC, and I felt quite comfortable where the decision landed, because I do think that any of us would not be using deception to obtain that unjust or illegal advantage to do that. So.
I see both your points. I do think that, personal gratification and edification is quite a loose term that it's hard to, like you say, because fraudulent behavior includes but is not limited to, it's utilizing it as an example more so than as a statement, which is to Lisa's point, and fraud itself captures the bar. But I do think, we have to be careful about ensuring that there is the ability to be transparent as an organization, and to ensure that we're not utilizing this in the future to silence people who are trying to say things. I know it's a fine line, but I see the sentiment for utilizing the code of conduct as a way of ensuring transparency and connection to the community.
Oh, sorry. Can I just ask why we've made the decision to put elected members in it?
Okay, I was maybe able to talk to that, but that I think came as a result of the general sort of advice in terms of how these types of policies should be maintained. That this policy, with some minor changes, has been applying to staff for some considerable time.
Are we really dealing with this second last bullet point, the personal gratification one, or is it broader than that? I'm sorry, was it?
No,
So,
it's what's on.
So,
Yeah,
if
but
I
I'm
can
just trying to work out what is the,
yeah.
I appreciate the problem that's trying to be solved in that. And I'd like to think there's a tidy way to solve it, but
Yeah, I know, I agree.
Hang on. So for me, the definition is the first sentence, and that matches word for word the definition on the Auditor General's website. The rest of it is more of an explanation for that. Can we not? And so for me, you need to be, using means of deceit or deception and misrepresentation and corruption for it to be considered fraud. But could we not just have the definition as that first sentence, and then all the rest of it can just be an explanation below the box, so it's not in the definition box. And the definition is that first sentence. It's as simple as that. The rest of it is an explanation.
That's good.
an advice note or something.
I could just go below the box becomes a small box, and the rest of it's below it.
Fraudulent behaviour could include.
Sorry, Gareth. With no aside from me, please answer.
Sorry, I asked
this
a question and you came up, but then we moved on. So what was my question?
How long is the start? Why
Why are elected members now in the policy?
Yeah, I think mine covered that off. To be honest, that had very much to add, other than to say it's standard practice now. Obviously, as we go through the process of reviewing our policy, we make it consistent with general guidance and other council approaches. So it's consistent with other policies that councils have.
And that was going to lead me on to the question of so what we'll probably see other councils moving towards this as well as they update, will we?
I haven't checked every council policy, but I suspect most of them, and that was confirmed by the independents on the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, have elected members incorporated into their full policies already. Okay.
Further discussion. Hang on. Just a few words myself. Frankly, if we can't hold ourselves to the same standard as the staff, contractors, and volunteers, we're missing out. We're not actually being accountable. That is my view, and I think they should be even across the whole spectrum of the council organisation. fraud, as it's written before us right now, is a very, very high bar. And to have such a high bar, that legal test in front of us now requires quite a large stick, I feel. Now, I think on the thing you're talking about, unintentional, well, the opposite of intentional is unintentional. I think what we've got in front of us actually captures what you're trying to say already. And so I don't see any need to wordsmith what's there before us now. And that's the way I'll be voting.
So,
Go for it.
thanks. So the reason I'm bringing this, I agree with you. The first paragraph, standalone, if that's the definition of fraud, it is a high bar. The discussion that we had at AFRC meant it didn't need to meet that test. It meant that fraudulent behaviour includes any, where are we, disclosing confidential or proprietary information to third parties for the reasons of personal gratification or edification, so education of the community. That passed the test with my interpretation of Mike's view, even if it wasn't involving deception, corruption, misrepresentation. So any release of confidential information would then be fraud. So there was confusion around that in different opinions. And so I think it's really important because an accusation of fraud is serious and it sticks, and we know that because of the actual definition. But as Gareth pointed out, we've put that the potential behaviours that might be fraudulent within the definition. And so then you're muddying the waters. So to me, we have to do something, whether it's putting that exception in there or whether it's pulling that list of fraudulent behaviours out of the definition and saying fraudulent behaviour could include, but it's not limited to, but it still has to pass that test. My concern is that there was confusion and still is around what passes the test and whether that paragraph is key and overrides the list below or not. And that's what all the debate, if you watch the AFRC meeting, that's what the debate was about, and everybody was confused about it. So
We can't watch the AFRC meeting.
not right now, we can't.
Put
We
it
can do it
to the
later.
vote. Thank you.
So what?
All those in favour of the amendment put before you?
I'm confused.
No, it's just the amendment.
I know, but
We can come back to it and do something else.
Hang on, no, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? Amendment failed. Right, we'll go back to the substantive motion.
Another.
Councils of what's before us, 1 through to 8. On parts.
Can I bring another amendment? Look, I'm sorry, but.
Sorry, no, and what for?
So
What's the amendment for?
Gavin's suggestion, people may not have liked that wordy thing, I didn't really either.
Hang on, what is your amendment?
My amendment would be to pull the words fraudulent behaviour includes, but it's not limited.
No, I will not accept that as an amendment because it's pretty much similar to what we just had. Moving on, I'm putting to the vote 1 through to 8. All those in favour? Aye. All those against?
Against,
One.
can I, no,
Thank you.
abstain?
Public excluded.
Could I ask that we look at that table and make that change to the draft policy anyway in terms of.
No, we're just
We
voting.
just approved.
No, I know, but
Hang on.
just because we weren't able to amend it in the resolution means that like the practicality of it is lost, whereas Gavin's suggestion was really simple and doesn't take away from the high bar of the definition of fraud.
We've already moved.
Okay.
It's passed. Right, I move that we move into public excluded. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.